This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate what if Naruto became Meer Campbell's bodyguard. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
We are in the Cosmic Era 73. 2 years had passed since the bloody Valentine War ended. The Earth Alliance and Zaft were engaged in another war as a result of a string of unanticipated events. Gilbert Durandal, the supreme chairman of the plants, was sitting at his desk, going through a number of files. His only goal was to put an end to the conflict and restore harmony between the plants and Earth. Additionally, he wanted to put an end to the hostility between coordinators, humans who have undergone genetic alteration, and natural-born people. He had just finished going through a file when the room was filled with a well-known song. A video of Lacus Klein singing "Quiet Night" caught his attention. Durandal sang with a smile. The individual in the video was someone he had selected to play Lacus Klein's part rather than the real Lacus Klein. Meer Campbell was that girl, and she was doing her job flawlessly. She was assisting in boosting morale while touring various Zaft bases around the world. His door opened abruptly, and he saw one of his advisors dash into the room. "Chairman," he was screaming, "something terrible has happened." Durandal gazed at his counselor. "Now tell me what happened," he said, "calm down." The advisor remained silent for a while. "S convoy was attacked by Blue Cosmo," he cried out. Durandal's face was adorned with a tiny frown. He inquired, "What happened?" Since it would take so long to replace Meer, he hoped she was safe. "Ms. Lacus wanted to go into town and visit with some of her fans that couldn't attend her concert on the base," said the advisor. "She had finished her trip and her convoy was headed back to the base when Blue Cosmo attacked. They quickly killed many of Ms. Lacus' guards as well as her manager. Our forces were able to arrive in time to save Ms. Lacus." Durandal gave his advisor a serious look. He inquired, "How is Lacus doing?" "She is shaken," said the advisor. "She refuses to leave her room without proper protection." "Then double her guard," Durandal yelled, his tone tinged with irritation. "I have, but she still doesn't feel safe," the advisor replied. Durandal let out a sigh. The words, "I shall talk to her," he whispered. After giving a nod, the advisor departed the room. Computer contacts, Lacus Klein. Lacus' number was dialed by the computer. A voice said, "Hello," with obvious fear in her tone. Durandal said, "Lacus, are you okay? I just heard what happened and wanted to make sure you were okay." Lacus remained quiet for a while. "I was so scared," she said, breaking down in tears. "Everyone was dying around me." Durandal simply listened to the girl in distress. "It's okay," he said. "I will make sure this won't happen again. I am doubling your guard as well as giving you a new bodyguard." "That's not enough," said Lacus. "I wouldn't feel safe." Durandal let out a sigh. He wanted to settle the matter before Meer left for Gibraltar, so he asked, "What can I do to make you feel safe?" Lacus questioned, "Can't I have Athron protect me?" "He cannot," said Durandal. He could hear her recoil at her given name, Meer. "He is needed on the front line, Meer." "Can't you get someone to be by my side at all times?" Meer begged. "Someone who only answers to me and protects only me." The request caused Durandal to frown. Her request made it more difficult for him to assign Sarah, a guard he intended to give to Meer. Durandal said, "I will see what I can do." Meer hung up after saying, "Thank you." Durandal summoned his other chairman and shook his head at this new irritation. His words, "We have a problem," feels that we cannot provide adequate protection for her, and wants someone whose only job is to protect her. Anyone have any ideas? According to Alan Klarzek, we can always hire someone. We don't know if they will protect with all their might, or just until they get paid, replied Ricardo Orff. Then hire Kyubi, replied Parnell Jesek. Kyubi? Inquired Durandal. Parnell remarked, "Kyubi is among the best mercenaries out there. He is known to accomplish every job assigned, without exception. I hired him previously when my daughters went to Earth last year. He stopped an attack from Blue Cosmos that happened during the trip. From what I heard, he killed them all without taking a hit." Durandal questioned, "Why have I never heard of this Kyubi?" Parnell retorted, "He is very secretive, and is only known by word of mouth. I learned of him from S father before he passed." Durandal gave a nod. He said, "Can you get in contact with him?" Parnell said, "Right away, Chairman," and walked out of the hall. In an arbitrary location in space, after slowly getting out of bed, a young man combed through his hair. He had 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek, blonde hair that was spiky, and a height of 5 feet 11. This was Kyubi, also known as Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze during this time period. He slowly changed into a burnt orange tee-shirt and jeans before leaving his room. A year or so ago, He picked up a salvaged Nazca class cruiser, and he floated through its halls. It was good to have his own ship, though it had taken him some time to get it to function. He was no longer dependent on others. He couldn't help but sigh as he gazed into space. Since his time, a lot had changed in the world. He was once referred to as the mercenary Kyuubi. He was Kyuubi no Yoko's Naruto Uzumaki Jinchuriki. The villagers had grown to despise him. He remained unfazed by it and, as he grew older, managed to win the villagers over. He overcame one formidable foe after another. Everyone he cared about was spared when he battled and vanquished the Uchiha clan's evil. He became the Jubi by merging with Kyuubi and the other Biju during the battle. Naruto became immortal as a result of this merger. After the great parting, he watched as his time gradually dwindled. Over the course of the following millennia, he observed how the world changed and offered assistance when required. He had served in more conflicts than he wanted to recall. Grinning, he walked into the CIC. He asked no one in particular, "How is everyone this fine day?" "It's going fine, Naruto," some voice said. "All systems are running at optimum capacity." Naruto said, "Thanks Mei," and took a seat in the captain's chair. He had built Mei, a computer AI, to operate the ship while he was away. He had gained some knowledge over the years, and with the state of technology, developing an AI wasn't all that difficult. The fifth Mizukage, Mei Terumi, had served as the model for the AI. They had gotten along well and spent a lot of time together during his tenure. They were more like friends with benefits than lovers. Looking at his star map, he said, "So, Mei, any jobs?" "Morgan Roti has asked us to find and destroy some stolen estrays," Mei responded. "Okay, sounds fun," he replied. "How's the pay?" "The statement, they're offering 5 million, Mei said. "Sounds fun." Naruto grinned, "Let's do it," Mei declared, plotting course to last known location of stolen units, as the ship began to move. Naruto gave a nod. Naruto said, "I'll be in the hangar if you need me," and walked off the bridge. He entered the elevator after floating through the corridors. A voice yelled, "Hey brat, wait up." Naruto turned to see a Great Dane-sized fox approaching him. It had 9 tails flowing behind it and was blood red. "What Kyuubi?" asked Naruto. He smirked and said, "Was wondering if you were going to work on that Mobley suit idea based on me?" As the elevator began to descend, Naruto shook his head. "No," he said. "I don't have the tools or the materials to do that. Also, stop bugging me about it." "No way in hell," smiled Kyuubi in response. "I want to see you fight in my likeness." Kyuubi glared at Naruto as he joked, "What, cute and fuzzy?" Kyuubi exclaimed, "I am a demon who can level mountains." At that point, "You're the one who forced me into this form." Naruto said, "I am still wondering why I did that," as he arrived at the hangar. "You were lonely without me," said Kyuubi. Naruto muttered, "That not it," and turned to face his mobile suit. A few months ago, he discovered a salvaged Zaku. It was a decent machine despite being orange and lacking a shoulder piece. "The others and I are the only things beside you, left of your time," replied Kyuubi. Naruto made a familiar hand gesture and concluded, "That's it. Kage Bushin no Jutsu." Before long, 10 Naruto copies materialized beside him. "Okay guys, let's get the Zaku ready. We have a battle to fight." The clones screamed, "Yes, boss," and gathered around the machine. Kyuubi did nothing but observe their work. Sitting in the cockpit, the original Naruto reviewed the operating system. He couldn't help but be in awe of human-made technology. He had no idea that ninja combat would give way to space combat involving enormous robots. He had to commend the coordinators for creating such a useful weapon. Naruto and his clones completed the Zaku adjustment a few hours later. Leaving the cockpit, he made his way to the locker room to retrieve his pilot suit. His symbol was affixed to a modified orb suit. He allowed his helmet to drift. With a sigh, Kyuubi floated beside him. Kyuubi remarked, "You really need a mate," which caused Naruto to sigh. Naruto complained, "We've been through this before, Kyuubi. I don't need a mate." "Yes you do," said Kyuubi. "When was the last time you got laid?" Naruto declared, "I am not having this conversation with you." Kyuubi thought, that last time was with that sexy librarian 5 years ago, while he gazed at Naruto. "Why didn't you make her your mate? She was perfect, sexy, single and willing." Naruto declared, "I need more than sex to get a mate. You're such a pervert." Kyuubi retorted, "I am not a pervert. If you want a pervert, talk to Nibi. She always talks about pulling you into her room and having her way with you." Murmuring, "Don't remind me," Naruto said. "I nearly didn't get away last time. That's why I left her with the others back at base." When Mei said, Approaching last known position of stolen mobile suits, Naruto stood up. Naruto said, "Thanks Mei," and got into his Zaku. With his tails hovering over the keyboard, Kyuubi made his way to the bridge and sat down in the weapon command center. Kyuubi said, "All set to go Kit," over the communications. Mei said, "Starting catapult," as Naruto positioned himself. He exclaimed, "Naruto Uzumaki, launching," as he was launched from the catapult. He soared into the air and searched for his targets. He grinned when he saw their trail. "Let's go." A couple of hours later, as he flew back into the hangar with what was left of his Zaku, Naruto sighed to himself. Naruto's battle had not gone well. The Astrays were in better shape than his Zaku, despite being older machines. He had lost one leg and both arms, but he had taken care of them. After exiting the cockpit, he went to the changing room and removed his helmet. Thought to himself, "Now we have to get another mobile suit." He made his way to the bridge. "No shit, Sherlock," explained Kyuubi. "That's the third one you destroyed." "I know," said Naruto. "It's hard to get an intact machine." "I know that," yelled Kyuubi. "Why don't you get a mobile suit from Morgan Roti instead of the money?" Naruto said, "I need money for supplies. You're the only person on this bucket. If you'd cut down on the ramen, you'd save a bunch of money," Kyuubi said. Naruto yelled, "Do not diss ramen," out loud. "If you two will stop arguing, I have a request from Parnell," Mei replied. Naruto said, "Parnell?" As he crossed the bridge. "Isn't he the guy who hired us last year for a protection job?" "The one and only," confirmed Mei. "He wants to set up a meeting for a new job." Naruto questioned, "Did he state what the job was?" "He wants to meet in person at the plants," Mei said. Naruto gave a nod. "Okay, let's go." A few days later. At the Zaft base in Plants, Naruto's ship was docking. He detested coming here. He had to explain that he salvaged his ship every time they asked where he got it. He detested the inconvenience they caused him. He put on his combat gear, which included a concealed blade on his wrist, 2 handguns, and a set of kunai and shuriken. The Plant Supreme Council met at Aprilius 1, and he rode a brief shuttle there. Since he usually met people at one of the outer plants, he questioned why he was at this one. He exited the elevator and entered the plant's open space. He soon found himself in front of the entire Plant Supreme Council after spotting a car waiting for him. Naruto thought, "Oh shit," to himself. "Who did I piss off to deserve this?" As the man at the head of the table said, "Welcome Kyuubi, it is an honor to meet you." Naruto smiled and said, "I'm glad to be here, again. So what can I do for you?" "We need you to protect Lacus Klein for us," the Supreme Chairman stated. To the surprise of all, Naruto said, "That's it? I thought you were going to arrest me, or something." Parnell reassured him, "Nothing like that, I can assure you, we just need someone with your expertise, to watch for us." "Okay," said Nato. "What do I get out of it?" "That is what we brought you here to discuss," stated another chairman. When he suddenly remembered what Kyuubi had said, Naruto nodded. He yelled, "I want a mobile suit," much to everyone's surprise. "A mobile suit?" inquired Durandal. "Why? Simple. I am a mercenary. I need tools to help me do a job. So, in today's world, I really can't do my job without a mobile suit," said Naruto. "Also, it has to be a good mobile suit, one that can keep up with the newest models. I not take a beat-up piece of crap." "I see," said Durandal. "Will you leave us to discuss your terms?" Naruto said, "Sure," and left the hallway. Startled, one of the chairmen questioned, "Are we seriously going to agree to his terms? I don't think that giving a mobile suit to a mercenary is a good idea. He could use it against us." "He is a mercenary," expressed Parnell. "That's what he does." A chairwoman said, "Can't we offer him money instead?" Durandal made up his mind. "I say we give him a mobile suit. It will be in our best interest to get him on the job as quickly as possible." Another chairman remarked, "Then we have to choose what kind of mobile suit we will give him." "Leave that to me," said Durandal. "Now, shall we finish our business?" Naruto was summoned back into the room. He inquired, "So, what's the verdict?" "We agree to your terms," declared Durandal. When Naruto said, "Great, now, can I get my suit and be on my way to protect Lacus?" Durandal gave a nod. "If you would follow me, we can discuss your job in more detail," he responded. After giving Durandal a nod, Naruto left the room. Naruto grinned inwardly. This is going to be fun. Durandal led Naruto into his office. He was struck by the office's enormous size. Telling himself, "Someone must feel very important," Naruto said. The reply from Durandal was, "I didn't choose this office, it came with the job." Naruto gave a sheepish smile. Naruto thought to himself, "I can't believe he heard me," as he sat down opposite Durandal. "So, what would you like to discuss?" I would like to discuss a few specifics about your job, as well as giving you a few options on which mobile suit you would like, Durandal said. Sounds good. Naruto nodded. As you know, you'll be guarding Lacus Klein, who is currently on tour of Zaft bases on Earth, Durandal stated. Once you get started on your job, you will only take orders from Ms. Klein. Okay, said Naruto. He was a little taken aback to learn that he was only to follow instructions from Lacus. It simultaneously made his job easier and more difficult. Why? Durandal reclined in his seat. A few days ago, was attacked by Blue Cosmos on her trip into the town near one of our bases, Durandal explained. Many of her guards, as well as her manager, were killed in the attack. She has requested extra protection. I was about to issue new guards to her, when she demanded that she wanted a personal guard. She wants her new guard's assignment to be, protect her, and only her. Okay, said Naruto. So, I will be taking my orders from her and not you then. That's fine. Now is there anything else I need to know? Durandal turned on the computer on the table and said, no, now, onto your payment. Here are a few mobile suit models we have available for you to choose. With a quick glance at the mobile suits, Naruto was taken aback by what he could choose from. He read the list through to the end. Wow, he sighed. I really can't choose. Can I have them all? Durandal reminded him, only one. Naruto gave a nod. He said, in a desperate attempt to make up his mind. He took another look at the specifications and decided. I want this one, Durandal said, passing him the specs. Durandal nodded after reviewing the information that had been given to him. That is acceptable, he said. It will take a while to assemble the machine, but it will be done by the time you leave Gibraltar. Naruto gave a nod of agreement. Nice, at last he said. Well, I should be going. Can't leave the princess all by her lonesome. As Naruto left his office, Durandal watched. He went over to his desk and turned on his intercom. Get me all of the data you can on the mercenary called Kyuubi, he said. He reclined in his chair, thinking deeply. I wonder how this will affect our future. With Naruto left the Supreme Council building and entered the plant's fresh air. He was excited about the work and intended to return to Earth as soon as possible. Happy at the prospect of seeing the Pink Princess once more, he sighed to himself. He had always considered her a daughter and had shielded her from harm when she was younger. He recalled that he had taken her to the park. Because she was afraid of heights, she had forced him to accompany her on the slide. As he walked, he laughed to himself. He pondered how much Lacus had changed in the many years that had passed since then. He couldn't help but be proud of her because he knew how she had contributed to the end of the last war. She had become such a lovely young woman. He continued to walk carelessly and bumped into someone. He grabbed the stranger as his reflexes took over. He glanced down at the one he was holding. She had short silver hair and was a stunning woman. For a few moments, the two gazed at one another. The woman said, can you put me down? Naruto quickly regained consciousness. Oh sorry, he said, helping her to stand up. I didn't see you there. I noticed, was her response. Naruto introduced himself as Naruto Uzumaki. I'm sorry for running into you. It's fine, said the woman. I wasn't paying attention either. I am Izalia Jewel. Naruto grinned and remarked, it's good to meet you, Izalia. She said, it was nice bumping into you, Naruto, but I have to go, and made her way to the Supreme Council building. After observing her go, Naruto made his own way. As he entered the elevator and made his way to the spaceport, he began to whistle. Whistling all the way, he made a hasty return to his ship. He climbed into his ship and made his way to the bridge. Kyuubi pivoted to confront him. Kyuubi inquired, so Kit, who's the sexy lady you saw this time? Naruto gave Kyuubi a perplexed look. He questioned, what are you talking about? Kyuubi said, you were whistling. You only whistle when you see a girl you think is attractive. No, I don't, Naruto said defensively in response. Actually you do, said Mei. I have 35 recorded incidents when you were whistling after you meet an attractive woman. I can pull up these files if you like. What? Kyuubi laughed as Naruto answered. Face it Kit, said Kyuubi. You whistle when you find someone attractive. Just accept it and move on. Naruto exclaimed, I do not, but Kyuubi and Mei chuckled. There is evidence that states otherwise, Mei noted. Naruto simply gave a headshake. Whatever, he said in agreement. We've got a job and we need to get going. Mei, plot a course to Earth. Mei said, yes, Naruto, and turned on the ship's engines. Kyuubi inquired, so, what's the mission? The captain's chair was occupied by Naruto. When Naruto said, we are going to protect Lacus Klein. Kyuubi grinned. Kyuubi exclaimed, we're going to go and protect Pinky. With excitement, she knew how to find the best places to scratch. Naruto shook his head and let out a sigh, to which Naruto replied, "You just like cute girls petting you." Kyuubi said, "You know me too well," and he burst out laughing. Naruto questioned, "Mei, how long until we reach Earth's orbit?" "We'll be here in 3 days," Mei answered. Naruto made the decision, "Well, I have 3 days to relax." He began to whistle once more as he made his way to the elevator. Kyuubi merely observed and chuckled as Naruto vanished from view. After 3 days, feeling his shuttle enter the Earth's atmosphere, Naruto let out a sigh to himself. He was on his way to the Zaft base in Carpentaria, where Lacus was staying at the moment. He had taken Kyuubi with him because Kyuubi kept pleading with him to go with him. Finally, Naruto gave in. Taking a big 9-tailed fox on board the Zaft shuttle was an interesting experience. As Kyuubi followed him to his seat, many of the other passengers gave him suspicious looks. The sound of the intercom turning on abruptly jolted Naruto out of his reverie. The captain declared, "We will be reaching Carpentaria soon." Finally, Kyuubi exclaimed, surprising everyone else. "Shut it, Kyuubi," answered Naruto. "You're scaring people. Didn't I tell you not to talk?" Kyuubi yelled, "I don't give a crap, they can go jump off a cliff for all I care." Naruto simply shook his head and sighed. Naruto made sure to get out of the shuttle as soon as he could after it touched down. Naruto appeared particularly content to be on the ground. "I'm going to get a nice scratch, yes I am," Kyuubi remarked as they left the shuttle. In frustration, Naruto simply shook his head. He remarked, "I shouldn't have brought you with me," as they strolled. "You know you wanted me around," Kyuubi came back with a cunning reply. "I am just that awesome." "As awesome as a stuffed animal," said Naruto. Kyuubi gave Naruto a furious glance. "If you weren't my superior, I would so flatten you into dust," he said. Naruto answered, "Keep dreaming," as they strolled. When Naruto noticed a sign that said, "Kyuubi," he approached. An automobile was waiting behind a Zaft soldier. With a salute, the soldier said, "Welcome Kyuubi." Naruto nodded and climbed into the car, saying, "I will take you to." As they started their journey, Kyuubi leapt into the back seat. Until they arrived at the main housing for officers and visiting dignitaries, they rode in silence. "S room is number 21, the soldier said, passing Naruto a key card. Kyuubi jumped out of the car after Naruto did. He said, "Thanks," and went inside the structure. He hurried to stand outside the door of Lacus's room. He heard footsteps coming toward the door. A recognizable voice on the other side of the door asked, "Who is it?" He clarified, "My name is Naruto, Lacus. I am your new bodyguard." Lacus remained quiet for a while. "Are you really my new bodyguard?" she inquired, "or just another Zaft soldier assigned to protect me?" Naruto chuckled. "Trust me, I am not with any of the Zaft forces." "Prove it," this woman insisted. Naruto let out a sigh. "How can I prove it when you won't open the door?" asked the man. Before long, Naruto could hear the locks turning. When the door opened, a stunning girl with pink hair emerged. She had a star-shaped hair clip in her hair and a form-fitting top that highlighted her best features. Naruto scowled as he examined her form. He had forgotten how attractive Lacus had been. "Now, prove you're not with Zaft," Lacus insisted. In response, Naruto said, "By seeing me, you should know I'm not with Zaft," as his suspicion rose. With a hint of anger in her voice, she questioned, "How does that prove you're not with Zaft?" As Naruto stepped into the room, his eyes narrowed. He stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" Lacus took a nervous step back. "What do you mean?" "According to Naruto, you're not Lacus. I guarded Lacus for years, so she would automatically recognize me. Since you didn't recognize me, you're not Lacus. Now, who are you?" She yelled, "I'm Lacus Klein," at Naruto. Kyuubi said, "Sister, you are not Lacus," as he entered the room. "I can never forget how Lacus smells, and you don't smell like Lacus." The Lacus impersonator screamed and leapt back. "Talking fox," she exclaimed. "Yeah, you're not Lacus." She screamed when she found out I could talk, Kyuubi responded. Naruto scowled. "Sit down," he told the young lady. Kyuubi gave the girl a furious glance as she sat down on the bed. Naruto pressed, "Now, who are you?" Kyuubi growled at the girl after she was silent for a short while. "Answer him, girl," insisted Kyuubi. Meer said, "My name is Meer Campbell. Chairman Durandal has me filling in for Lacus Klein." Naruto silently surveyed Meer. He said, "One moment," and moved toward the telephone. Taking out his phone book, he began dialing a number. It took him a few moments to get a response. "Yes, can you connect me to Chairman Durandal? This is Kyuubi, Lacus' new bodyguard." He patiently waited. "Yes, I will hold." Durandal shouted, Hello, across the line. Using his best impression of Ricky Ricardo, Naruto said, Durandal, you've got some splainin' to do. Who is this? Inquired Durandal. Naruto let out a frustrated sigh. It's Kyuubi, answered Naruto. Durandal asked, Kyuubi, how are you? Are you with Lacus right now? Naruto said, yeah, I'm here, but not with Lacus. You have some explaining to do. Asking, what do you mean? Durandal said. Naruto let out a frustrated sigh. The girl I am currently with is not Lacus. She may look like Lacus, but she is not Lacus. I guarded Lacus for a few years, so I know her quite well. So please explain to me why I am with a girl who looks like Lacus, but is not Lacus. Durandal remained silent for a while. When Durandal said, her name is Meer Campbell, I hired her to take the role of Lacus Klein since the real Lacus cannot be found. She helps calm the people that see Lacus as a star. Naruto let out a sigh. Naruto answered, all right, but you ought to have told me this before I met her. I nearly had my fox attack her. Meer turned to Naruto in disbelief. So, is there anything else I need to know? Durandal said, no, and you have a fox? Naruto let out a sigh. The fox is not important, but if something like this happens again I will quit this job. I don't like it when my employer doesn't tell me all the information I need to perform my job, is that clear? Crystal, concurred Durandal. Is there anything else? Naruto answered, just make sure my mobile suit is ready, and hung up. He looked over at Meer. Now that is out of the way, let's start over. My name is Naruto, I will be your bodyguard. Fearfully, Meer questioned, you were going to have your talking fox attack me? Naruto simply let out a sigh. That was just an empty threat to get the answers I needed out of Durandal. Don't worry about it. Whimpered Kyuubi. I wanted to nibble on her arm for a bit. Naruto sighed as Meer gave Kyuubi a startled look. He's just playing a practical joke on you, he assured her. Unbelieving what Naruto had told her, Meer turned to face him. She insisted, just keep him away from me. Kyuubi merely grinned. He gave Meer the puppy dog eyes and rested his head on her lap. Am I that scary? Meer couldn't help but notice how adorable the fox was acting as he gazed down at her. She patted his head and reassured him, you're not scary. Naruto simply shook his head and sighed. Down, Kyuubi, said Naruto. Now, Meer, I hope we can become friends because we will be spending a lot of time together. Meer and Naruto simply gazed at one another. Naruto had been Meer's bodyguard for a few days, and thus far, the two were not getting along. Meer disliked spending much time with Naruto because she was still wary of him. But she did like having Kyuubi close by. She confided in Naruto that she felt safer around the fox than around him. As he watched the girl with the pink hair pet Kyuubi, Naruto simply sighed. Meer scratched behind Kyuubi's ear, and he whispered, oh, right there, with satisfaction. That's it. Naruto simply stood up and shook his head. He hurried over to the computer and began typing. He connected to Mei through his own private network. Mei said, hello, Naruto, as her avatar came into view. How goes the mission? Naruto sighed as he glanced between Kyuubi and Mei. It's going, was his response. My charge doesn't seem to like me, though. Mei looked at Naruto, perplexed. She asked, I thought you knew Lacus. Oh, I know Lacus, Naruto clarified. The girl I am guarding is not Lacus. Her name is Meer Campbell and she has been hired by Chairman Durandal to act like Lacus. Mei gave a sympathetic nod. She said, that complicates things. If people find out she isn't the real Lacus, there could be a huge backlash against Meer. I know, but that's not my problem, Naruto answered. All I have to do is make sure she's alive and comfortable. Okay, so is there anything you need me to do? She responded. See if you can find out where Lacus is, asked Naruto. I want to make sure she okay. Mei answered, will do, and ended the call. As Naruto stood up, he turned to see Meer staring at him. What? He inquired. She inquired, when are we leaving this base? I don't want to stay here any longer. Naruto responded, taking his weapons off his person, we are going toward Byakuya later on today, so just relax. Meer yelled, relax. How can I relax when there are people out there who want to kill me, at Naruto? After giving the frazzled girl a quick glance, Naruto rose from his seat and approached her. Meer looked up at Naruto with a bit of fear in her eyes. Slowly, Naruto encircled Meer with his arms and held her. Let it out, he said. Meer simply began to cry without saying anything. She released all of the emotions she had suppressed since the attack by sobbing into Naruto's chest. Until she ran out of tears, she wept for everyone who perished and the horror she had seen. After a while, Meer stopped crying and simply put her head on Naruto's chest. With terror, Swollen eyes, Meer gradually separated from Naruto. Naruto had already left when she attempted to speak to him. He began cleaning his weapons while seated at the table across the room. As he worked, Meer observed him. She was unable to comprehend him because he would be reassuring to her one minute and aloof the next. Kyuubi approached Meer after noticing that she was staring at Naruto. Kyuubi said, "Staring at him won't teach you anything." Meer looked over at Kyuubi. She questioned, "What do you mean?" Kyuubi simply let out a sigh. "Never mind," he shook his head in response. After witnessing Kyuubi leave, Meer turned back to observe Naruto. He was currently disassembling his handguns. She watched as he meticulously cleaned every single piece. He reassembled the pistol slowly and cocked it. Meer was staring at Naruto when he turned around. As he put down the pistol, he asked her, "Yes?" Meer averted her gaze. Nothing," she said, her cheeks slightly flushed. Naruto simply shook his head and resumed his weapon cleaning. Meer muttered, Naruto, once more, can I ask you something?" Naruto looked in Meer's direction. He said, "Yeah, what is it?" With trepidation, she asked, "Why did you hold me before?" Naruto let out a sigh. He answered, "You appeared to be in need of it. You were in a predicament you didn't anticipate finding yourself in, and terrible things occurred. When most people experience that kind of thing, they usually have someone to lean on. That wasn't someone you had. I decided it would be better to let you express those feelings to me now rather than later, since I will be protecting you from now on." After giving Naruto a startled look, Meer turned away and said, "Thank you," before moving toward the window. Naruto simply nodded and returned to his weapons. As time passed, the two took care of their own affairs, with Kyuubi dozing off and his snores echoing throughout the room. "Time to go," Naruto said as he picked up the phone and listened, quickly thanked Meer, and then the phone rang, bringing everyone back to a shared reality. After holstering all of his weapons, Naruto woke Kyuubi, who yawned and sprang to his feet. "Is it time to leave?" As he stretched, he inquired. After nodding, Naruto went to the door, hurriedly opened it, and Kyuubi emerged. Naruto turned to face Meer and said, "Are you ready, Lacus?" Naruto inquired. After nodding and slowly getting up, they left the room and made their way to the lobby, where they found a waiting car and soon found themselves heading to the airstrip. Naruto saw that they were loading a bright pink Zaku onto the plane as they got on board. Why in the world is that there? As he sat down beside Lacus, Naruto thought to himself. The plane took off swiftly, and they found themselves flying away from Carpentaria. Meer sighed with relief as he looked out the window. Even though she didn't want to admit it aloud, she was very glad to be leaving Carpentaria, and all she wanted was to forget what had happened there. Finally, she said to herself as she watched the clouds pass. Watching Meer calm down, Naruto felt relieved that she was safe, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. He stood up and stretched, and as he made his way to the back, he gestured for Kyuubi to keep an eye on Meer. He noticed the pink Zaku in its holster, and he was pleased to see that a flight pack was attached to its back. He told himself, "At least we have this, if something happens," and made his way back to the front of the aircraft and into the cockpit. "Hey guys, how are you?" "It's going well," one of the pilots said, turning to face Naruto. "We'll be reaching Byakuya in 3 hours." Naruto nodded, returned to his seat, and leaned back, but the nagging sensation persisted. Then a loud alarm went off, and Naruto leapt out of his chair. He hurried into the cockpit and asked, "What's happening?" With urgency, he asked. One of the pilots replied, "Some Earth Forces fighters are targeting us." The other pilot, puzzled, questioned, "What are they doing here? I believe that the final battle forced them to leave the area." His partner turned to Naruto and said, "I don't know," adding, "You have to take Ms. Lacus and board the Zaku in the back. If things worsen, we'll kick you out." With a nod, Naruto hurried out of the cockpit and into the passenger area, where he took hold of Meer's arm and lifted her. When Meer tried to ask questions, Naruto simply dragged her to the back of the plane, guiding her to the pink Zaku and drawing her close before snatching up the loading cable to the cockpit. Meer stared at Naruto bewildered. Pulling Meer into his lap, Naruto sat down in the cockpit and said, "Hey!" As Naruto was ready to shut down the cockpit, a voice screamed. Realizing that he had forgotten Kyuubi, Naruto sent the cable down to the fox and waited for it to pull him up. Kyuubi then entered the Zaku and curled up close to the foot pedals, crying, "You nearly left me," as he attempted to settle in. "I'm sorry," Naruto said, "but I was busy." "No you weren't," Kyuubi said, "You simply ran up, took hold of Meer, and abandoned me there." As he examined every system in the Zaku, Naruto simply ignored Kyuubi and said, "We're dropping you now." Naruto nodded as he felt the Zaku fall out of the plane and move backwards, as one of the pilots yelled over the radio. Meer screamed in terror and clung to Naruto, who disregarded her cries and pulled the Zaku from the fall, slowing their descent but noticing on the radar that the Earth Forces squadron was pursuing them. "Hold on," yelled Naruto. After pushing the Zaku into a steep dive that gave them more space from the Earth Forces, Naruto dodged many of their shots as they dove. Eventually, the ocean water came into view, and Naruto grinned. He waited until the very last second before pulling out of his dive and using the water as a shield. He flew close to the water and examined his weapons. "Wha?" she asked, feeling the G-forces press against her. It was a custom machine, built for Meer's performances, so it didn't really need all the standard weapons. The only reason the suit had a beam tomahawk was because it was included with all Zaku and the designer thought it would be easier to leave the weapon in place than to try to take it out. The Zaku was designed for one person, not two and a fox, so option 1 was a bad idea. "Damn it," Naruto said as he dodged beam after beam. He looked at the 4 fighter planes that were pursuing him and realized that he had 2 options. Try to take them out or run as fast as he could and hope they ran into help. Since Meer wasn't strapped into a chair, she wasn't protected in case he had to make a risky move. The second option was better, but he had no idea whether there were any friendly nearby or whether they would encounter more Earth Forces units, and he was abruptly distracted when he saw a missile approaching. "Whoa!" As he swiftly drew the Zaku to the side, sending the missile crashing into the water, Naruto uttered those words, scowling as he saw Meer's terrified expression, her eyes closed as she clung desperately to Naruto. "Mayday, Mayday! Lone Zaku in need of assistance," Naruto said as he swiftly activated his communication systems. "Please respond, any Zaft forces," he said, avoiding attacks. After failing to get a response, Naruto snarled in exasperation and continued to dodge enemy fire while drawing his beam tomahawk. "Hold tight," he ordered Meer, before flipping the Zaku to face the oncoming fighters. He threw the tomahawk and saw it destroy one of the planes before returning to him. Before Naruto could throw it again, he was hit by a barrage of missiles, so he quickly spun the Zaku around and flew as close to the water as he could, waiting for a few seconds as the missiles got closer, then flipping the Zaku backward and using the thrusters to block the missiles with a wave of water. Pulling the Zaku hard to the left to dodge another round of missiles, Naruto yelled, "Mayday, Mayday! Any Zaft forces, please respond." "This is the Zaft battleship Minerva," someone said over the comm. "Thank God," sighed Naruto. "This is Lacus Klein's bodyguard, Naruto. A squadron of Earth Forces fighters is attacking Ms. Klein and me right now, and we need help." "With the Minerva, are you able to confirm that he is speaking the truth?" Marine Hawk, the ship's communications specialist, was questioned by Deputy Captain Arthur Trine. "Yes sir," Marine said before calling the unidentified Zaku, who was shocked to receive the distress call because they believed they had eliminated the majority of the Earth Forces in the area after the attack on the Lovergan a few days prior. "Zaku, could you please confirm your Zaft identification number?" she asked. "Damn everything. I'm trying to stay alive, and you're asking me for something I don't have," yelled the voice on the other end. "Please assist us," over the comm, a female voice sobbed. Marine had heard the voice a lot and recognized its source right away. "Is that Klein Lacus?" Marine inquired hastily. "No, it's Mother Teresa," said another voice, "it's Lacus, of course." "Kyuubi, stop talking, you almost hit us," Naruto uttered those words. Turning to face the Minerva's captain, Talia Gladys, Marine said, "Ma'am, I have confirmed that Lacus Klein is on the unit." With her light brunette hair covering one eye, Talia turned to face Marine. "Tell them we are sending help," she said, and Marine nodded. "Get Athron. Instruct him to leave in Savior." Marine acknowledged, "Yes ma'am," adding, "Zaku unit, help is on its way." After saying, "Thanks," Naruto said, "I don't think I can keep this up much longer." After saying, "Understood," Marine abruptly disconnected the Zaku and activated the intercom, saying, "Athron Zala to his unit, Arthron Zala to his unit." After a few moments of breathless waiting, he said, "Athron Zala reporting." "What is it, ma'am?" Talia grabbed her cell phone and said, "We have a distressed Zaku nearby. Please go out and assist them." After saying, "Understood ma'am," he was soon loaded onto the catapult and sent flying from the Minerva. He immediately switched to fighter mode and made his way to the distressed Zaku coordinates. With Meer and Naruto. Naruto, who was barely hanging on after losing one arm and leg, snarled in exasperation as he flew the Zaku. Kyuubi yelled, "Kit, you have to fight back. I'd rather not die in a Zaku. I still have a lot of things I want to do." "You and me both," Naruto said, dodging another round of missiles, "but that's kinda hard when we don't have any weapons to fight with." "This is Athron Zala, Zaku unit." A voice called over the comms, "Please respond." The name made Meer tense. Athron, you've come to save me, she exclaimed. What am I, chopped liver? Naruto sighed, he muttered. Athern answered, Lacus, why are you there? That isn't significant at the moment. We need help, Naruto yelled. I've lost a lot of things. We won't make it through another hit. Act quickly. A red fighter plane suddenly passed by, and Naruto, Meer, and Kyuubi watched as it fired its main guns, destroyed one of the Earth Force's planes, made a sharp dive, changed into a mobile suit, and swiftly destroyed the remaining enemy planes. Flying toward the damaged pink Zaku, Athron declared, all enemies eliminated, and said, I'm going to take you back to the Minerva. He was angry at himself for not defending himself, but he had Meer to worry about, and if it had been just him in the Zaku, he would have destroyed the enemies in a heartbeat. Thanks, Naruto said, feeling the arms of the red mobile suit hook around the Zaku. He let out a brief sigh of relief as they flew. Over the communications, Athron said, Minerva, we are coming in, and put down the Zaku. Naruto said, thank you Kami, and opened the cockpit of the Zaku. Kyuubi exclaimed, finally, I'm free, and hurried out of the Zaku before plummeting to the Minerva's floor, saying, I forgot there was gravity. When Meer escaped from Naruto's grasp and ran toward the pilot of the red mobile suit, the two of them touched down from the Zaku cockpit, and Naruto shook his head. Athron. Naruto watched as she assisted the pilot in removing his helmet as she sobbed and threw him to the ground. I thought his name was familiar, Naruto remarked, grinning as he saw the pilot's face. It seems Run. Run is playing hero again. Oh good, my favorite chew toy, Kyuubi said with a sly smile as he turned to face Athron. Naruto sighed and turned to face a young woman with short red hair. You can chew on him later, he said. Who are you? She insisted. Looking at her, Naruto recognized her as one of the ship's key pilots because she was dressed in a red Zaft uniform. I am Naruto, Lacus's bodyguard, he said, and, you are? My name is Luna Maria Hawk, the girl said, and tell the captain how you got here in a pink Zaku, so you can follow me now. Watch pink, Naruto commanded Kyuubi, who nodded and went toward Meer while Naruto trailed Luna Maria to the bridge. In front of the ship's captain, Talia Gladys, Naruto stood on the Minerva's bridge. She was a very attractive woman with either light brown or dark blonde hair, though he couldn't tell, and her eyes were a deep gray that glinted in the light. Why are all the women in Zaft so gorgeous, I wonder? All of the women on the bridge, including the captain, had blushes on their faces, and Naruto thought to himself, unintentionally blurting it out loud. Mr. Kyuubi. As she managed to control her blush, Captain Gladys yelled, please don't say things like that. I'm sorry, Captain, but I can't help it, Naruto said, giving her a sheepish smile that had a hint of evil. I can't help but tell the truth when I'm around women as gorgeous as you. After giving Naruto a serious look, Talia said, again, please refrain from saying such things, or I will have to confine you to the brig. Immediately saluting her, Naruto said, yes ma'am, winking at Talia. To Naruto's dismay, Talia didn't appear to accept his gesture. Now, Kyuubi, why were you in Lacus, wearing the pink Zaku, being pursued by a squadron of Earth Forces fighters? We were traveling on a Zaft transport ship to Diokua for their upcoming performance. The Zaku was traveling with us because it was specially designed for Lacus's performances. With a serious expression on his face, Naruto stated, the pilots had us board the Zaku for our own safety after the Earth Forces attacked our transport. They ejected the Zaku to allow us to escape, but the fighter pursued us. Since my safety came first, I decided to flee rather than engage in combat. I called out for help, and your ship came. Talia remained quiet for a short while as she took in the information. Why don't you have a Zaft identification number if you are his guard? She questioned him. I am not a member of Zaft, replied Naruto. I am an outside party that is being paid to guard Ms. Klein. I will call the chairman to verify this information, Talia said, frowning as she observed the man in front of her and wondered what skills he possessed to be qualified to guard Lacus Klein. Why did the chairman hire outside help to guard one of the most important figures in the plants? She asked. That is fine, Naruto said, simply nodding, I have nothing to hide at all. Talia gave a nod. I will have someone escort you back to Lacus, she stated. You may stay on the ship until we reach Diokua. Naruto bowed slightly and said, thank you, saying, it is much appreciated. Take him to the dining hall, Talia said, nodding and waving at Myron. Athron and Ms. Lacus are present. I'll ask Athron to show them the guest rooms. With a salute, Myron said, yes ma'am, and approached Naruto. If you would follow me, please. Talia scowled at Naruto as he followed Myron off the bridge and into the elevator. Lead the way beautiful, Naruto said, giving her a foxy smile. Talia faced her sub-captain and asked, "How do you feel about him?" With an unreadable expression on her face, she asked him. "He seems to be very suspicious," Arthur said after giving it some thought. "I've never heard of Kyubi before, and now he is guarding," he said. "Despite his seeming flirtatiousness, I have the uneasy feeling that he is extremely dangerous." Having the same impressions, Talia nodded and said, "I want to get in direct contact with the chairman as soon as possible when Myron gets back." SB. Myron led Naruto down the corridor toward the main dining room, where Athron and Lacus were. The two of them walked in silence until Naruto turned to face the girl in front of him, who was shorter than him, had long red hair and two pigtails, and he had to admit that the Zaft uniform looked very good on her. "How long have you worked for Zaft, then?" Naruto inquired. Myron looked at him curiously, and Naruto nodded. "Only for about a year now," she said. "We had just gotten out of basic training, and were assigned to the Minerva when the war started. Can I ask you a question, Kyubi?" "Sure you can," Naruto said calmly, nodding. "Just stop calling me. I feel old because of it. Naruto is my name." She felt special for knowing his name and said, "Okay, Naruto," with a hint of redness on her face. "Why haven't I heard of you?" Myron stopped in her tracks and stared at Naruto in terror. Naruto turned to face her and saw her abruptly change her expression. "It's simple," he said, grinning. "I'm so good at my job, there is no one left after my missions to spread news about me." "It's okay," Naruto said. "I'm not here to cause harm to others. My sole purpose is to protect Lacus." Myron nodded, but she continued to keep her distance from Naruto as they started walking again. Naruto simply sighed to himself, a little disappointed that Myron was avoiding him because, as a soldier, she should be accustomed to people dying. When they finally arrived at the dining hall, the door was blocked by numerous crew members. Upon entering the crowd with Myron, Naruto heard rumors of Lacus and Athron. Naruto sighed and pushed his way through the crowd, entering the dining room with Myron slightly behind. Athron sat at a table at the other end, with Lacus cuddling into his side. He appeared quite stressed and appeared to be trying, rather unsuccessfully, to get Lacus to let go of him, but each time he tried, a growl was heard, forcing Athron to stop. With a sly grin on his face, Naruto approached the group and said, "Oh run. Run, you look so cute," in a cutesy voice. Naruto laughed to himself when he saw Kyubi, who was watching Athron with a smile on his muzzle. Athron scowled as he turned to face Naruto. "Don't call me that," he complained, his voice tinged with rage. Naruto chuckled. "But run. Run," he started. Athron sprang to his feet and gave him a fierce look. "Is run insane?" Athron yelled, "My name is not Run. Run," and Naruto merely chuckled. "Still can't take a joke, can you run?" "Run," Naruto said with a sigh. "Now, Captain Gladys stated you were supposed to show Lacus and me to the guest rooms." Naruto laughed and followed, Kyubi at his side, as Athron nodded and scowled before turning to leave the dining room with Lacus at his heels. Naruto looked down at Kyubi as they were walking and said, "So, did anything exciting happen while I was away?" Naruto inquired. "Not really," Kyubi said with a disappointed sigh as they left. "I tried to give Athron my favorite greeting, but Fakus stopped me. After we settle in, I want you to explore the ship and see what you can find out about this ship and its crew," Naruto said, laughing. "You'll get your chance," he said, smiling. "I'd like to know their thoughts on this war." Kyubi gave Naruto a curious glance and asked, "Is that correct?" He pondered, "Are we considering joining the battle?" "That's not it," he said, shaking his head. "I just want to hear what they think about the conflict. Furthermore, I want to determine whether they are sheep or capable of independent thought." Athron led them into a pleasant-looking room with a large bed and a personal computer, and Kyubi nodded eagerly, saying, "Can do," as they arrived at their destination. "This is your room for the duration of your stay here," Athron told them. "If you need anything, just activate the comm, and someone will assist you." Naruto gave a nod. "You understand, Meer?" he questioned the girl with the pink hair. With a hint of annoyance in her voice, Meer nodded and turned to face Athron, smiling mischievously. "Yes, Naruto," she said. "May I ask for your assistance constantly?" Without responding, Athron turned to face Naruto and said, "You know she's not the real Lacus, don't you?" he inquired. "Well, yeah," said Naruto, shaking his head and glaring at Athron. "I was Lacus's bodyguard for several years. I'm able to distinguish between the real and fake Lacus." "Why are you protecting Meer, then? From my memory, you don't accept shady jobs," inquired Athron. "What jobs I take are not your concern," Naruto said sharply as he turned to defend himself. "Now, go fight your war. I need to keep a girl safe." After shoving Athron out of the room, Naruto turned to Kyuubi and said, "You know what to do." Kyuubi fled the room quickly while grinning, and a few seconds later, a girlish scream was heard coming from down the hall. Naruto simply grinned and said, "I guess Kyuubi was able to give Athrun his proper greeting after all." Naruto was examining everything in the room when Meer turned to face him. As he raised the mattress on the bed, she asked, "What are you doing?" Naruto put the mattress back down and said, "Just making sure that there are no listening devices in the room." Meer simply sat down and shook her head. Her words, "You don't have to do that," gave him comfort. After a moment of staring at her, Naruto began to laugh and said, "Zaft would never do something like that." Meer's head cocked to one side as she glared at him. "What's so funny?" Naruto simply kept laughing for a short while. After a while he stopped laughing and turned to face Meer. "Oh, that was hilarious," he said. "You are so naive it's funny." Meer gave Naruto a fierce look. She yelled angrily, "What do you mean, I am naive?" "You are naive," Naruto said, looking downcast at Meer. "You believe that Zaft, which is a military organization, would not try to gather intelligence at all times. I would expect them to listen in on someone who is not in their organization." For a few moments, Meer gazed at Naruto incredulously. Is that what Zaft would actually do? Is the chairman likely to do that? As Naruto completed his room sweeping, Meer looked on. He held several items in his hands. "Here," he said, passing a couple of tiny round devices with antennae on the sides to Meer. "That is the real face of Zaft." Meer gazed incredulously at the gadgets she was holding. Was this the chairman's and Zaft's actual face? SB. Happy to get away from the bridge for a bit, Talia walked into the dining hall. She had verified that Kyuubi was, in fact, Lacus Klein's bodyguard by getting in touch with the chairman. She made an effort to learn anything she could about Kyuubi, but the chairman knew nothing about him. As she went to get her food, she asked herself, why would Gilbert hire someone to guard Lacus, when he knows nothing about him? After taking a seat at a table and starting to eat, she noticed that several of the female crew members were congregated in one area. She put down her food and focused more on the group. Many of the girls appeared to be petting something, Talia noticed. Talia made the decision to unravel the mystery now. In her captain's voice, she questioned, what is going on here? Then she realized that Luna Maria was among them. "Captain," exclaimed Luna Maria, startled. As Talia moved through the crowd, she discovered that everyone was stroking a big, red, nine-tailed fox. The fox sighed dreamily, "Oh yeah, right there," with all of its tails wagging with joy. This enormous fox on the ship startled Talia, especially since it had the ability to talk. She pivoted and gazed at the cluster of females encircling the fox. She gave the order, "All right, all of you, get back to work." She looked over at the fox. "How did you get on my ship?" The fox stretched as it gazed up at her. The fox yawned and said, "I came with Naruto and Lacus." "Naruto?" Talia asked, perplexed. When the fox said, "You know him as Kyuubi, don't know why he using my title as his alias." Talia didn't say anything. It never occurred to her that Kyuubi would be accompanied by a gigantic talking fox. She took a seat beside the animal. "Why are you here in the dining hall, and not with your master in your room?" At Talia, Kyuubi flashed his teeth. He said angrily, "He is not my master, I am his partner." Talia questioned, "How can a fox be his partner? Also, how can you talk?" Kyuubi said, "I'm just that awesome," as he rose and left the table. As Talia watched Kyuubi leave, she couldn't help but wonder who this Naruto was. "Let's just say I've been around for a long time and picked up a few things." Returning to her meal, she set out to learn everything she could about Naruto. SB. As Meer sat in her room, bored beyond belief, she sighed to herself. Athrun hadn't visited her since they had boarded the Minerva a day earlier. He would, she had hoped. Meer complained, "I am so bored," as she surveyed the space. Naruto said, "That's good," while he wiped down and sharpened a few of his blades. "Can't we go around the ship and see Athrun?" she said. "No," said Naruto. "It would cause more trouble than I want to deal with." "But I want to do something," a sulky Meer said. With a sigh, Naruto put down his knives. Naruto said, "All right, I'll give you something to do." "Really?" smiled Meer in response. Naruto simply waved her over and nodded. While he took a knife from the table, Naruto said, "I am going to show you how to use a knife." Meer gave him a bewildered look. She questioned him, "Why would I want to do that?" Naruto simply let out a sigh. "If you know how to use a knife, you can at least defend yourself when I'm not near you," he said. "Now, first we need to get you some more comfortable clothes." She whimpered, "But I don't have anything else, I don't want to do this." Naruto let out a frustrated sigh. He said, "I have you covered, and took a scroll out of his side pocket. "Just wait here." She watched as he briefly vanished into the opposite side of the room before coming back carrying a change of clothes. On the bed, he tossed them. He urged, "Here, put these on," and went out into the hallway. "Meet me out here when you're done." Lacus simply looked down at the clothes on the bed and nodded. It was a basic shirt and shorts designed for a female. She wondered where Naruto had gotten the clothes as she gazed at them, but she was pressed for time and changed right away. Naruto was leaning against the wall when she left the room. He said, "Follow me," as they made their way to the training area. To get to their destination, they hurried through the ships. The training area was deserted when Naruto quickly looked around to see if anyone was there. With a smile, he ushered Meer into the center of the space. "Now, let's begin," he said, grinning. He produced a knife, which he gave to Meer. "First, you are going to learn how to properly hold the knife, so as not to hurt yourself. Watch me." With a reverse grip, Naruto pulled out another knife. When you are defending against an opponent's attack, you will hold the knife in this manner. Keep your arms slightly bent and away from your body when holding the knife in this manner. After nodding and following instructions, Meer turned to face Naruto, who examined her grip and said, "You need to hold the knife better or you will get it knocked away from you." Meer held the knife as lightly as possible. As Naruto approached her, Meer nodded and gripped the knife more tightly, feeling uneasy with the blade in her hand. "Why am I learning this again?" With a tone of curiosity in her voice, she asked him. He sheathed his knife and said, "Like I told you before, it is to be able to protect yourself if I'm not there with you." "But what good would a knife do if they had guns?" she said. "A knife is a very handy weapon," Naruto said with a smile as he approached her, adding that most attackers won't be expecting you to carry one because they are easy to conceal. It will extend your life. "Are you sure?" Meer questioned him, not convinced. "Of course," Naruto said, nodding as he approached her. "I taught this to Lacus when she was little." Meer stared at him in awe. Was Lacus Klein capable of wielding a knife? She was startled out of her reverie when she felt a pair of arms encircle her. "Now, let's get you into the correct stance when holding the knife." Meer blushed as she felt Naruto press against her, guiding her body into the proper position for knife guarding. She had to admit that Naruto was well built, and she felt secure with his arms wrapped around her. "Is that pleasant?" he asked, and Meer nodded quickly, blushing. Naruto simply grinned and carried on with the lesson, teaching her the fundamentals of knife defense for several hours, much to Meer's annoyance as she didn't enjoy exercise and only did what was necessary to stay healthy. When he finished the lesson, Naruto didn't appear to be tired at all. He didn't even perspire. He glanced at the worn-out Meer and laughed to himself, recalling the laughter he had received from teaching the real Lacus. Naruto turned to see Myron Hawk and Luna Maria in their training gear and heard a voice say, "Well, this is a sight I never expected to see. Who would have thought Lacus Klein would be learning to knife fight?" Naruto asked. With a chuckle, Naruto said, "Well, it's a good skill to have," and added, "If you want, I can teach you as well." "Oh, I don't think that is necessary," Luna Maria said with a smile, adding, "I am very good with a knife already." "Would you like to test those skills?" Naruto asked, looking at her with excitement. He asked with a sly smile. Meer looked at him as if he was crazy. He still wanted to fight after all the training they have been doing. Luna Maria returned the smile and said, "It would be fun," before moving to the wall and taking out 2 practice knives. "Do you think this is a good idea?" Myron asked Luna Maria as she approached her sister. "He is dangerous and you could get hurt." "After all, I am a Zaft Red, one of the best," Luna Maria said with a smile and a pat on her younger sister's head. "I will be fine," she said. "I can take him." Luna Maria tossed him a practice knife, and Myron nodded, turning to face Naruto, who appeared uninterested in the fight. "Should we begin?" After catching the knife and grinning, Naruto said, "Sure," and rushed forward, holding the knife in reverse and launching a swift knife sweep attack on Luna Maria when she was within range. "You don't waste time, do you?" Luna Maria said with a smile as she leapt back. After saying this, she launched her counterattack, bringing the knife down on Naruto's head, which he blocked and quickly punched Luna in the chest. Naruto grabbed Luna Maria's leg and drew her close after she ducked the attack and kicked out, losing her balance and falling to the ground with the practice knife against her neck. Leaning in on Luna, Naruto said, "That was fun, you did great." "Not really," Luna said, turning away, trying not to blush. "You totally destroyed me." "I just have a lot of experience with knife fighting," Naruto said with a simple smile before getting up. Luna laughed and said, "I can tell. Maybe we can do this again sometime." "I would love to," Naruto said with a smile, but Meer grabbed his arm instead. She turned to face Luna and Myron and said, "It was nice seeing you." Luna could hear anger in Lacus's voice as they vanished. "Naruto, can we go back to the room? I need to take a shower," she said as she dragged Naruto out of the room. It had been a few days since he and Meer had boarded the Minerva, and Naruto sighed to himself as he checked the time. He had been teaching Meer the art of knife fighting every day, and she was gradually improving. With a loud yawn, Naruto slowly got out of bed and turned to face Meer, who was still sound asleep. He approached her quietly and grinned. She seemed so content when she was sleeping but could be a little whiny when she was awake. Given that it was still early in the morning and that nobody would be in the training room yet, Naruto grinned and got his equipment before leaving, yawning loudly once more as he went. He had to admit that it was pleasant to be on a ship with other people because he had been alone so much that he liked passing people as he moved through the ship. After entering the training room, which was naturally deserted, he hurried to the shooting range, programmed the targets, and took his spot. Naruto found that switching targets every 5 seconds was a pleasant, leisurely pace, and he quickly settled into a rhythm as he fired his guns. This program was a decent way for Naruto to decompress and unwind. After the program ended, Naruto hurriedly pulled out his gun magazine when he heard clapping behind him. Naruto turned to see Athron standing there, and Athron said, "I see you haven't lost your touch," as he approached. "Well, I have years of practice," Naruto said, loading another clip into his pistol and chuckling as he restarted the target program. Athron watched as Naruto hit the bullseye every time and never missed a target. Naruto quickly put his gun down and emptied another clip. "So, will you shoot or just stand there and do nothing?" As he disassembled his firearm, Naruto posed the question. Simply shaking his head, Athron moved to Naruto's left open shoot lane, drew his gun, and launched the same target program that Naruto was using. Naruto put his gun down and watched as Athron hit each target with ease, as he had practiced. As Athron threw out his empty clip, Naruto grinned and said, "Very nice," adding, "You have developed into a great shot." "Well, a war will teach that to you," Athron said, loading another clip and nodding. "Very true," added Naruto, "war can be a great teacher." Naruto watched for a few seconds before joining Athron, who nodded and began another round of the target program. Before long, the only sound coming from the gun range was the sound of gunfire. When a voice interrupted Naruto and Athron's rhythms to say, "That is amazing," Naruto turned to see Luna Maria and 2 other Zaft Reds standing there. "Where did you get your shooting skills?" Luna Maria inquired of Naruto. As he holstered his gun, Naruto responded, "Just years of experience. Now I will be going. Enjoy your practice." After leaving the gun range, Naruto went back to the room he shared with Meer. When he entered, he noticed that Meer was awake and still appeared a little sleepy, which made him laugh to himself because she looked adorable half-awake. "Time to wake up, Meer," Naruto said sweetly as he approached her and gave her a gentle pat on the head. She was gradually warming up to him, which made his job much easier. Since their first training session together, she seemed to enjoy keeping him close, especially when other females were around. Meer nodded as she rubbed the sleep from her eyes. Naruto led Meer to the bathroom and shut the door after her. Naruto sighed in frustration as he sat down in the desk chair. According to Naruto, the Minerva was ordered to clear out an EF outpost before coming to Dyakuya, which was supposed to be a short mission. They were expected to arrive in Dyakuya in a few days. Naruto doubtfully said, "I'll be the judge of that," as he turned on his PC. He immediately went to the Minerva network and began hacking his way in, but after a few minutes of futile attempts, he laughed and said, "They have updated their security system since the last time I tried to hack a Zaft network." "Time to wake up, Tenten," Naruto said as he waited for the files on the flash drive to load. Tenten was another artificial intelligence, AI, he had made and carried with him. She was primarily used for breaking into other computer networks. Naru-chan, she said with a smile, "It's been a while." Tenten's avatar appeared on the screen, resembling the real Tenten from his younger years. She stretched and yawned before turning to face Naruto. Naruto nodded and said, "Sorry for letting you sleep so long." "True," he said regretfully. "It's fine," Tenten said with a simple smile, "I like a good nap. What can I do for you now?" "What you do best, of course," he said gravely, adding, "I'm on a Zaft ship right now called the Minerva. My charge and I are still on board when they are sent on a mission. Please provide me with as much information as you can about the mission and this ship's combat history." Naruto simply leaned back in his chair and let Tenten get to work, while Meer emerged from the bathroom, all dolled up. Tenten gave him a brief salute, said, "Can do," and vanished into the Minerva systems. Glancing over Naruto's shoulder, she approached him and asked, "What are you doing?" she inquired. Naruto yawned and turned to face her. "Just getting some info," he said. "That was fun," Tenten said, downloading the file onto Naruto's computer, adding, "The system actually put up a fight this time." Tenten soon appeared on the screen holding a large file. "You covered your tracks, correct?" Naruto asked, turning to face Tenten in the computer. "I don't want a repeat of last time," he asked her. "Don't insult me." Tenten growled irritably at Naruto, saying, "I always cover my tracks." He answered, "Good girl," and said, "Thanks for the help." Tenten bowed and said, "Anytime." Before leaving the screen, Naruto ejected Tenten's drive and put it in his pocket. "What was that?" Meer inquired, somewhat perplexed. He shut down his computer and said, "There's nothing to worry about. Let's go grab some food now." After Meer's suspicious glance was cut short by her rumbling stomach, Naruto laughed and escorted her out of the room, whereupon he made a shadow clone and set it to go through the files. SB. As they walked into the dining room to get their food, Naruto saw that the majority of the crew followed Meer with their eyes, glaring at some of the males who treated Meer like a piece of meat, until their eyes locked with Naruto's, at which point they quickly averted their gaze and Naruto grinned. He thought, still got it, and he led Meer to an open table, where they ate in silence, with no one daring to join them. Naruto was more than content with this arrangement, as he would have been irritated by more company. A group of Reds approached the table while Naruto was in the middle of biting, and when he looked up, he saw Athron, Luna Maria, and the other two Zaft Red pilots seated at the table. "Athron, it's so good to see you," Meer said excitedly, beckoning the poor young man to sit beside her. Naruto laughed as he observed Athron attempting to handle the current circumstance. "It's only been a little while since you last saw me, Lacus," Athron said, attempting to sit up straight. "But I always miss you when we are apart," Meer retorted, pouting and nestling into his side. It was always entertaining to watch Athron writhe, and Naruto smiled and kept eating, knowing that once he was in Meer's grasp, he would not let him go. Luna said, "Naruto," yanking Naruto out of his reverie. "Yes," Naruto said, putting down his fork. Luna pointed to the Zaft Reds that Naruto was unfamiliar with and said, "I wanted to introduce you to these two. I was hoping to do it this morning at the range, but you had left." "Hello, my name is Naruto," Naruto said calmly as he turned to face the two. "You can call me Kyubi." "My name is Reza Burl," the boy with the blonde hair said, nodding in recognition. "I have heard little about you." "Yes, it's really pleasant, isn't it?" With a hint of sarcasm, Naruto answered. "I am Shin Asuka," Naruto said as the black-haired boys watched him for a short while. "So, Naruto, can you tell us anything about being a mercenary?" Luna said. "Good, now everyone's introduced," with satisfaction. "There's never a dull moment, and the pay is good," Naruto said with a smile. "It's quite an interesting profession," he said. "So, did you serve in any of the armed forces before becoming a mercenary?" Ray asked. Paying close attention, he inquired. "Here and there," Naruto said, his voice tinged with rage as he turned to glare at Ray. "Are you serious? Which part?" Ray asked interestedly. He really didn't like Ray, and he was searching for information that Naruto wasn't going to divulge. "Everything," Naruto said, returning to his meal. After Naruto's response, Ray's eyes narrowed, and he was about to ask another question when the ship began to shake violently. Naruto hurried to his feet to see if everyone at the table was okay before the ship rocked again, toppling everyone. "What on earth is happening?" As she clung desperately to Athron, Meer yelled. "All pilots to their machines, code red." Ray hadn't moved since the ship had shaken for the second time, but Naruto saw Luna, Athron, and Shin dash out of the room toward the hangar as Maeren's voice gave the order over the intercom. "Lacus, come on," Naruto ordered as he left the dining hall. Naruto crawled over to him and saw that he had struck his head against the table's corner and was heavily bleeding. Naruto picked Ray up slowly from the floor and made his way to the door. With a sigh, Naruto surveyed the downed pilot and shook his head before making his way to the communication console on the wall and calling the bridge. Meer slowly got up and followed Naruto, and they arrived at the medical bay in record time, where Ray was quickly bandaged and placed in a bed to recuperate. With a serious expression, Captain Gladys emerged on the screen and asked, "What is it?" she complained. "What on earth is happening?" Naruto yelled angrily. As the ship trembled once more, Talia reported, "We were ambushed by a small fleet of EF vessels." Naruto remained upright during the tremor, and Meer clung to one of the beds. "How did that occur? I thought the radar would detect them," cried Naruto. "I don't know," Talia growled at Naruto, "but they might be using new stealth technology." Naruto observed as Talia's focus was diverted. Frowning, she said, "Someone find Ray." After saying, "Ray is here in the hospital wing," Naruto frowned. He got hurt when the attack began. Talia scowled. The words, "Damn it," she whispered. "Get Luna Maria on the line," she needs to cover both sides. The sound of these commands didn't sit well with Naruto. He turned to see Meer's eyes were filled with fear. He turned toward Meer and closed the line to the bridge. He commanded, "Stay here," and made his way to the door. Panicked, Meer turned to face him. She yelled, "Where are you going?" Naruto merely grinned. Naruto clarified, "To make all those who threaten you, go away," before rushing from the room. SB. After stepping out of the elevator, Naruto dashed into the hangar. A white Zaku Phantom was still in its holster when he saw it. Naruto saw that the flight pack was still fastened to the pink Zaku. In a hurry, he rushed to a Zaku mechanic. He called out to the mechanic, "Hey," to get his attention. "Can you move the flight pack from the pink Zaku to the Zaku Phantom?" The mechanic gave Naruto a crazy eyes look. He said, "Can you do it again?" "Why, yes," the technician replied, "but it won't do any good. The Zaku Phantom has a lock on the activation code." "Just do it," yelled Naruto. The mechanic hurried off to fulfill Naruto's directives. Naruto heard a gun cocking as he dashed toward the Zaku Phantom's cockpit. Turning quickly, he saw 3 guards standing behind him. When one of the guards said, "You are not authorized to fly that unit, step away from it, now." Naruto's expression was one of annoyance as he glanced at the guards. "I really don't have time for this. Please back away and I won't have to hurt you." Naruto merely sighed, and the guards remained unflinching. The guards watched as Naruto slowly stretched his hand above his head, saying, "Fine then, have it your way." When he said, "Don't blink," the sudden disappearance of Naruto from the guards' view startled them. "I said don't blink." The first guard was swiftly seized by Naruto, who hurled him against the wall. The next guard attempted to aim his weapon at Naruto but quickly realized that he had lost his grip. With the gun in his hands, Naruto hurled it towards the wall. The guard yelled, "Damn you," and produced a knife. Naruto simply gave him a scowl before charging ahead. When the guard attempted to stab him, Naruto punched him multiple times, knocking the air out of his body as he did so. Naruto faced the final guard. He let his most recent victim drop to the ground and said, "So, you want to stop me now?" The final guard simply backed off and dropped his weapon. When the guard gave up, Naruto smiled. "That's what I thought." The mechanic marveled at Naruto's ability to eliminate the guards as he watched the battle. Naruto saw that the mechanic was no longer functioning. Naruto asked angrily, "Don't you have a flight pack to mount?" The mechanic leapt back to his job. Swiftly stepping into the Zaku Phantom, Naruto examined the controls. Naruto remarked, "Ray takes really good care of his machine," while installing the Tenten flash drive into a port that was open on the controls. "Tenten, unlock this machine." Tenten said, "On it," over the speakers in the cockpit. All of the ZAKU systems came online a short while later. Naruto said, "Thank you," and began to configure the controls. When Tenten said, "No problem," she laughed. "I love hacking mobile suits." "I know you do." Naruto grinned as he shut down the Zaku cockpit and activated the external cameras. Over the speakers, he called, "Is the flight pack mounted yet?" He got a thumbs up from the mechanic. "Good, Tenten, load me onto the catapult." Tenten, dressed in a female Zaft uniform, came onto the screen. She saluted, "Yes, sir," and took command of the catapult systems. On the bridge, as the battle played out before her, Talia's face was frowning. This attack took them completely by surprise. The Minerva was up against 4 carriers. They were outnumbered in mobile suits and ships by the enemy. To the best of their abilities, Aphron and Shin were engaged in combat in the air, but the ones they allowed to pass by were overwhelming Luna Maria. The ship was rocked by a flurry of missile strikes. "Where's the damage?" exclaimed Captain Gladys. Arthur reported from his seat, "Ma'am, there's a fire on level B and we lost port missiles tubes." "Damn it," Talia swore, gazing out over the field of combat. "If only Ray were out there." Myron exclaimed, "Ma'am, something's wrong. The catapult deck is opening." Talia gave Myron a startled look. She declared, "I didn't authorize that, shut it down." "I can't, ma'am," Myron answered back. "Something is blocking my access to that system." Talia yelled, "Damn it, what's going on down there?" Myron reported, "Ma'am, Naruto is going out and raise Zaku, while using the Zaku camera." "What?" said Talia. "What is he doing in a Zaku? Get me in contact with him, now." "Yes ma'am," said Myron. "Zaku, please come in, Naruto please respond." Naruto responded over the comm, "Anything for you, beautiful," which caused Myron to flush. Talia picked up her captain's phone, ignoring Naruto. She insisted, "Naruto, what do you think you are doing?" Naruto answered, "What does it look like? I'm going out there to destroy the enemy that is attacking this ship." Talia scowled. That is not your job, she said. Your job is to protect Lacus Klein. As he completed putting the wizard pack on the Zaku, Naruto thought, by protecting this ship, I am protecting Lacus as well. So, if you'll excuse me, I have a battle to get to. Hey, Kyuubi, take over gun controls of the Minerva. Can do, said a voice behind them all. The whole crew turned to see Kyuubi standing there, all 9 tails waving in his glory. Now, go show them something they will never forget. Arthur stood and gestured to Kyuubi. I won't allow you to take control of this ship's weapons. You will get us killed, he yelled. His sentiment was echoed by many crew members. Kyuubi merely laughed. His response was eager. You really don't want to try and stop me, he said. I might not leave you alive. With his gun raised, Arthur shot the fox. Kyuubi appeared to vanish in a plume of crimson smoke. The rest of the crew, including Arthur, searched everywhere for him. Before long, the bridge was filled with laughter. Kyuubi remarked, foolish brat, behind Arthur. Arthur was hurled across the bridge and into a wall with a swift flick of his tails, saying, I've killed people for less. Now, does anyone else mind if I take control of the guns? Knowing how foolish it would be to try to stop the fox from taking control, Talia glared at Kyuubi. It was to be feared for the strength it had just displayed. There was silence across the bridge. Thought so, he said, assuming Arthur's chair while his tails scuttled at breakneck speed across the keyboard. Talia marveled as this fox completed the most exhaustive examination of all functional weapons in less than a minute. All set, Naruto, Kyuubi said, grinning malevolently, shall we give them hell? With a, let's show them why we are the best at what we do, Naruto answered. Naruto Namikaze, launching. As the white Zaku flew out of hangar, everyone watched. Kyuubi's next battle cry caught everyone's attention. Time for hell to begin. SB. This is War by 30 Seconds to Mars, is the battle song. Naruto soared through the air, surveying the state of the battle. At the moment, the Minerva was exchanging fire with the EF ships ahead of it. At the moment, Atheron and Shin were fighting a number of Wingdom squads. They couldn't eliminate them all, but they were surviving. Luna Maria was struggling. She couldn't join the battle because she couldn't leave the Minerva's surface without a flight pack. She was currently pinned down against the Minerva, despite having eliminated her fair share of Wingdoms. Grinning, Naruto accelerated his thrusters to their fullest and charged the Wingdoms. When a white blur slammed into the Wingdoms, they realized this too late. The squadron dispersed rapidly but was unable to locate their target. When he saw the red of a Zaku using a beam tomahawk to cut his Wingdom in half, an EF pilot asked, where is he? With the help of the explosion, Naruto advanced on the next Wingdom and destroyed them as well. After regrouping, the other 2 Wingdom pilots began launching a volley of beams at Naruto. With incredible accuracy, he pushed the Zaku forward and it flew between the beams. He hit his target, and shortly after, the tomahawk also took them down. As he flew forward, Naruto noticed 2 more Wingdom squadrons approaching him. Raising his beam rifle, he opened fire. Naruto's beam fire had hit 2, but the Wingdoms soon dispersed. He used the first Wingdom as a kickoff to climb higher as he flew past it. Naruto declared, time for all of the little pests to die, and dumped fire on the Wingdoms. Despite their best efforts to avoid the attack, the Wingdoms were destroyed. Naruto focused on the ships that were attacking. He uttered into the calm, Kyuubi, bring on the pain. Kyuubi yelled, what do you think I'm doing? While firing the Minerva's main guns. Naruto observed as Kyuubi's volley of fire struck its target with pinpoint accuracy. Not a single target was spared. Naruto observed as the volley of death brought down all of the enemy ships. As a few Wingdoms attempted to flee, Naruto turned to see Atheron and Shin fly back to the Minerva. Naruto merely smiled. He said, no you don't, and took off after the fleeing troops. He soared above them and dove sharply to charge in. With lightning speed, he drew the beam tomahawk and cut through the Wingdom as easily as butter. The other Wingdom charged Naruto, drawing its beam saber. While waiting for the enemy to arrive, Naruto remained motionless and floated. The Wingdom attempted to cut Naruto in 2 with its beam saber. Naruto merely used his hand to halt the blow and delivered a square punch to the Wingdom's chest. The Wingdom flew back, but a well-aimed beam brought it to a stop. Naruto noticed that there were no more enemies in the area. To be sure, Naruto floated for a few seconds. Naruto's warning alarms abruptly went off, and he saw a flurry of missiles approaching. He whirled to confront the onslaught. After drawing his beam rifle, he destroyed all of the missiles with a rapid series of beams. Naruto sought to find the attack's origin and said, Kyuubi, can you tell me where those missiles came from? In response, Kyuubi said, they were fired from behind one of the islands. After saying, "Thanks Kyuubi," Naruto left to find his adversary. Naruto quickly identified his assailant. He was being pursued by one of the remaining EF ships. Grinning, Naruto rushed forward. Despite the enemy ship's best efforts to destroy him, Naruto managed to dance through the assault. Watching a lone Zaku phantom fly through enemy fire as if it didn't exist was just breathtaking. As the Zaku drew nearer, everyone on the enemy ship watched in terror. After landing on the ship's deck, Naruto brandished his beam tomahawk. "Die!" Naruto yelled, bringing the axe down onto the bridge of the ship. With a trail of death and flames behind him, Naruto flew away from the sinking ship and returned to the Minerva. End of song. SB. Naruto swiftly left the Zaku Phantom's cockpit after landing in the Minerva's hangar. When he landed, several Zaft guards were standing around him with their weapons aimed at him. Naruto simply placed his hands on his hips and shook his head. Naruto exclaimed, "So, we're back to this again. I thought the last guard got the picture." With their weapons still leveled at their target, none of the guards moved. With a bored expression on his face, Naruto stood there without flinching. Before long, Captain Gladys rushed in his direction. Naruto grinned as he saw her approaching. "Enjoy the show," warned Naruto. Talia approached and took hold of his collar. She yelled, "What the hell were you thinking?" at him. "Your stunt could have sunk this ship and killed the crew." Naruto simply smiled at her. "It wouldn't have," he said in response. "It was under control." "Under control?" exclaimed Talia. "You commandeered Rei's Zaku Phantom, attacked several of my crew. Your pet put my vice captain in the medical bay. What part was under control?" Naruto simply laughed and slipped out of Talia's hold. As Talia turned to look for Naruto, she felt powerful arms encircle her waist. Naruto whispered, "I had everything under control," into her ear. "If I wanted, I could have taken control of this entire ship, and you, and your crew, couldn't have stopped me." As the guards stood there, uncertain of what to do, Naruto breathed in her ear for a short while. They couldn't fire without injuring their captain because he had her in his grasp. Naruto whispered, "My dear Talia, I have one piece of advice for you. Never anger the slumbering dragon. It might be the last thing you ever do." Talia felt Naruto let go of her and gradually disappear from view. As they ran toward her, the guards checked on her. Atheron and Luna Maria joined the guards. With a worried expression, Luna said, "Captain, are you okay? What did he do to you?" Talia remained quiet for a while. Talia shuddered as she recalled Naruto's icy tone. "He just gave me some advice," she said. "He is one not to be trifled with." Chairman Gilbert Durandal reviewed the Kyuubi specific recent battle data for the Minerva. Kyuubi's performance with Rei's Zaku Phantom astounded him. On his own, he had eliminated more than 20 wingdoms. After that, he had easily destroyed the Earth Force's ships. The incredible outcomes that Kyuubi produced left him speechless. With just a Zaku Phantom, he was able to perform in the freedom on par with Kira Yamato. Durandal said, "Very impressive." After concluding his review of the battle, he would be a very valuable asset to have. Only Atheron could just about match Kyuubi's combat effectiveness, according to Durandal's quick comparison of Kyuubi's combat stats to those of the Minerva pilots. Leaning back in his chair, Durandal took in this information. He grinned, picturing Kyuubi making sure the Destiny plan would be realized. On his computer, he hit a button. Calmly, "Please connect me to the captain of the Minerva," he said. After hearing, "Yes, Chairman," his secretary quickly linked him to the Zaft communication systems. Durandal patiently awaited Captain Gladys' response. A lovely voice said, "Yes, what can I do for you today, Chairman?" Durandal thought of the captain with a smile. Curious, he said, "How are you doing, Captain?" As the captain considered the question, she was silent for a while. She answered, "I am doing well," with a tone that betrayed her weariness. Durandal gave a nod. He said, "That's good to hear," with a laugh. Captain Gladys reiterated, "So what can I do for you, Chairman?" being aware that this call involved more than just small talk. "I can't hide anything from you, can I, Talia?" Durandal smiled in response. "The reason I called was to see if you could gather some information on a certain guest on your ship." "You mean Naruto," said the captain, a little uneasy. Durandal considered the name and said, "Naruto? Oh, so that is Kyuubi's name." "Yes, him. I was reviewing the battle data that we had received on him and I wanted to find more information." "Yes, Chairman," complained Captain Gladys. "But he is a very dangerous individual. If you had read my report, you would see that he has put several of the ship's guards in the medical bay." Durandal said, "I understand, with knowledge. But I want him to be on our side. His combat ability alone will help us tremendously." I want you to gather all of the information you can on him, by any means necessary. Captain Gladys remained silent for a while. She said, I will do my best, Chairman, with a heated tone. I just want to warn you of the consequences that may come from it. Durandal remained quiet for a while. I understand, Captain, he said coldly in response. But, I believe with the right persuasion, he could be brought over to Zaft and become a great individual to have in our organization. Captain Gladys said, very well, Chairman, and disconnected. With his chair leaned back, Durandal gazed out over the Dikua base. He observed how his plans were gradually coming together and how Kyuubi would soon assist him in realizing his destiny. With the Minerva Talia, Gladys put down the phone with a sigh. The orders she had just received infuriated her. She detested Gilbert's treatment of her in this way. First, while they were in a major battle zone, they had the orb representative on board their ship. He then made Athranzala a member of Faith and assigned her to her ship. She was now entrusted with gathering information on a highly unpredictable and dangerous person who was supposed to protect Lacus Klein. That man, she said angrily, frustratingly rubbing the bridge of her nose. She considered her directive to use any means necessary to obtain information about Naruto. That was the last thing she wanted to hear, but she knew Gilbert wouldn't have unless the information was absolutely crucial. She sighed to herself as she considered her options for learning more about Naruto and realized there was only one way to do so. The one thing she was unwilling to do. She let out a sigh. Why me? She was aware, however, that she couldn't make one of her crew members do it. Quietly, she made up her mind and readied herself for the fight. She would have to woo Naruto in order to obtain the information. Myron, please contact Naruto and have him meet me at my quarters. Astonished, Myron gazed at Captain Gladys for a moment. She made a connection with the room of Naruto and Meer. It was Lacus who responded. Yes, she said cheerfully, what can I do for you? Myron gave Lacus a smile. The captain would like for Naruto to meet her in her private quarters right away, she said. He's sleeping right now, but I'll let him know, she smiled and ended the call. Myron turned to face her captain, who had a determined expression on her face. Myron provided an update. He will be at your quarters shortly. Rising to her feet, Captain Gladys turned to face her sub. Captain. Arthur, you have the bridge while I am gone, she said, making her way to the elevator. With determination, she entered. She only needed to make sure she kept the dragon asleep so she could obtain the information. With Meer and Naruto. Naruto felt someone shake him, and he slowly opened his eyes. His instincts took over immediately. He took hold of the individual's hand and threw them onto the bed. With haste, he retrieved the concealed kunai from his sleeve and placed it against the victim's neck. When his vision finally cleared, he saw that Meer was standing beneath him, her eyes wide with surprise. With a flush, Naruto carefully withdrew the kunai from Meer. Sorry, reflex, Naruto smiled sheepishly. Still a little taken aback by what had happened, Meer slowly sat up. Her expression abruptly changed to one of rage, and she began punching him as forcefully as she could. She yelled, reflex. As she assaulted him. You could have killed me, I saw my life flash before my eyes. What the hell is wrong with you? As Meer let out her rage and waited for her to exhaust himself, Naruto allowed the punches to land on his chest. Breathing heavily, Meer gazed at Naruto. He said, you done? And Meer gave a nod. Naruto looked at her sorrowfully and sighed. I'm sorry. I have been like that since I was young. You would never know who will try to attack you in your sleep. I didn't mean to scare you. Meer's head cocked to one side. She whispered, what do you mean since you were young? Naruto cursed himself for allowing that to happen as he glanced at Meer. He said, it means nothing, in an attempt to shift the conversation. Now, why did you wake me up? Though she decided to question him later, Meer wanted to know more about what Naruto had said. In a frustrated tone, she said, the bridge called, and the captain wants to see you in her quarters. Naruto simply nodded and got to his feet. He began to leave the room after saying, then, I'd best not keep Ms. Captain waiting, should I? Meer sighed as she watched him leave. She intended to ask the blonde a lot of questions. Even if it meant tying him up, she was determined to learn as much as she could about him. With Naruto approached Captain Gladdy's quarters by moving slowly down the hallway. The fact that he had been invited actually caught him off guard. He wanted to know what she wanted, but he was also a little tired of her. However, she might have been seduced by his trademark namikaze charm. After arriving at his destination, he knocked. Through the intercom, Talia's voice said, come in, and the door opened. When Naruto entered, he saw Talia sitting at her desk with her jacket slightly open and a bottle of wine in front of her. Talia noticed a smile on Naruto's face as she turned to face him. Welcome Naruto, she gave him. I'm glad you accepted my invitation. Naruto merely grinned. He said, "It was my pleasure," and took a seat on the couch by the desk. I was a bit surprised by the invitation, but was glad to receive it just the same. Talia took out 2 glasses and nodded. She uncorked the bottle and asked him if he would like a drink. He said, "I would love one," while she poured the drinks. She smiled at him and handed him a glass. It was a very well-aged wine, Naruto thought as he sniffed it. He grinned and took a sip. There is nothing like a fine wine. Talia gave a nod. She said, "It is a very old wine," and sat down beside him. It was made back in CEO1. Naruto gave a nod. He said, "I'm surprised that you have such a rare wine," with a tinge of humor. It was a very good year. At his remark, Talia laughed. "Having a friend who appreciates good wine pays off," she said. She sipped her wine and turned to face Naruto. "So, tell me about yourself." Naruto had a slight smile on his face as he glanced at Talia. Before taking another sip, he asked, "Why do you want to know?" Talia scooted closer to Naruto while placing a finger to her chin as though she was thinking deeply. "You look interesting to me," she smiled in response. "You told me not to wake the sleeping dragon. I can't help but be interested in the dragon." Naruto laughed and nodded. "Well, that's a reason I can get behind," he said, taking another sip of alcohol. "Just remember, you can only disturb a dragon so much until he bites." Talia laughed. Her words were, "I will keep that in mind," she whispered in his ear as she leaned close. "But, what if I want the dragon to bite?" Naruto smiled broadly as a chill went down his spine. He thought, "She is a feisty one," as he examined Talia. He was very tired of her because she was a very beautiful woman. She appeared to be a very serious and composed individual. Someone who didn't feel comfortable flirting. He was aware of her desire. In private, he made the decision to follow the knight's course and figure out how to take advantage of it. With a big fox-like smile, Naruto remarked, "Well, if you want to get to know me, then you have to tell me about yourself as well." Talia simply grinned, but she was secretly concerned. What if he had discovered her and was only playing her? She made the decision to see what she could find because she knew she had to get information no matter what. She said, "Very well," while pouring herself another glass of wine. "You start." Naruto merely grinned. At the end, he winked at Talia and said, "Okay then, my name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I am 26 years old. I like foxes, training, ramen, books, and my precious people and pretty women. I dislike traitors, liars, rapists, and not knowing the entire truth." Talia tried not to flinch when she heard the last part. He was a very astute man, and she knew that in order to extract more information from him, she would need to be completely convincing. She smiled seductively at him. She remarked, "Well then, I guess it is my turn. I am Talia Gladys. I am 29 years old, captain of the Zaft battleship Minerva. I have a young son who is about 6 years old. I enjoy reading, playing with my son, and taking care of others. I dislike liars, traitors, rapists, cheaters, and people who don't fight for the ones they love." Naruto gave Talia a startled look. He never thought a beautiful, active Zaft captain like Talia would become a mother. He also questioned her statement that he didn't like those who didn't stand up for the people they cared about. He grinned to himself, knowing that he could take advantage of that. "I surprised you have a son," Naruto remarked, his voice tinged with surprise. "You're so beautiful, you could never tell." At the comment, Talia couldn't help but flush. "Thank you," was her response. "He is the brightest light in my life." As Naruto watched Talia consider her son, she nodded. She exuded a maternal glow that he could not help but notice. He kept thinking about his departed wives and kids and how much he missed them. He immediately pushed that idea from his mind and turned his attention to the stunning woman in front of him. While pouring himself another glass of wine, Naruto inquired, "So what made you want to become a captain in Zaft?" Talia reclined. She reflected on this period of her life and remarked, "I joined Zaft only after the First War. I just wanted to protect my home and my son." Naruto grinned broadly as he turned to face Talia. "I really respect you for protecting someone that is important to you," Naruto stated earnestly. Talia noticed that Naruto's eyes had a tinge of sadness, and she pondered what had caused it. She made the decision to try to use that to elicit additional information from him. She questioned him, "So do you have anyone precious to you?" Naruto sipped his wine once more. "Not anymore," he said plainly, his voice tinged with melancholy. Talia filed that away with a nod. She put her head on Naruto's shoulder and leaned closer. "That must have been painful," she said softly and sympathetically. Raising his hand, Naruto began to caress Talia's head. He had no conscience about what he had done. He always stroked his wife's hair when they were around him. Talia simply sighed in satisfaction, relishing the moment. She had only ever had one man do this for her, and he was very far away. Soon after, she enjoyed Naruto's company and forgot about her goal of gathering information. She hadn't been in such close contact with a man in a number of years. The two simply enjoyed each other's company while sitting in silence, unconcerned with the outside world. After some time, whistling a cheerful melody, Naruto strolled through the Minerva's corridors. He hoped that Talia would invite him back to her quarters because they had had a great time together. A few years had passed since he had relished the companionship of a stunning woman. Even though he was still tired of her and her intentions, he was determined to try to spend time with her. Upon entering his room, he noticed Meer sitting on her bed with a disinterested expression. Sarcastically, Naruto questioned, "Having fun?" With a frustrated expression on her face, Meer turned to face him. She complained, "No, I'm not having fun." I haven't left the room since you left and Kyuubi hasn't been around either. I tried to call Athron, but he is busy." While listening to Meer gripe, Naruto simply nodded. He said with a laugh, "Well, we can always go train." Meer gave a headshake. She pouted and sat down like a child on the bed, saying, "I don't want to." Naruto took a seat beside her. He said, "What do you want to do?" After giving it some thought, Meer shrugged, and Naruto let out a sigh. Naruto got to his feet and extended his hand. He said, "Come on," and Meer glanced up at him. He helped her stand up after Meer took his hand. With a smile, Naruto escorted Meer from the room and swiftly through the ship's corridors. Soon after, the two found themselves on the ship's deck, directly beneath the bridge. Meer gazed in wonder out over the ocean's azure waters. She watched some birds fly by as she sprinted to the railing. As Meer looked around, Naruto stood by the door and observed. Her gaze shifted to Naruto. With a shout, "This is amazing," she peered out. Naruto gave a nod. Although he was happy that Meer could occasionally be so carefree, he thought she would face many challenges in the future. "I wish this was just an easy job," he sighed to himself. One voice said, "You seem to be having a good time," from Naruto's side. Luna Maria was standing next to him when Naruto turned his head. Feeling the ocean breeze on his face, Naruto closed his eyes. "Of course I am," he said calmly in response. "I am enjoying a beautiful day with a beautiful woman standing beside me." At his remark, Luna Maria flushed, but she soon forgot it. She scooted toward him and looked at him knowingly. "A sardonic flattery will get you nowhere," she retorted. "So I heard the captain wanted to see you in her quarters. What did you two do in there?" Naruto smirked knowingly at Luna. "Now that would be telling," was his sardonic reply. Luna looked at him like a puppy dog. "You can tell me," she said, using her finger to draw circles on his chest. Naruto merely gave Luna a smile. He no longer worked on the puppy dog eyes very often. He could only fall for a select few, like the real Lacus. The good news was that he could easily resist Luna. He leaned closer. He whispered, "If I said anything, you might want to try it as well," into her ear. Luna's face turned scarlet. "You and the captain?" She stumbled, startled. Naruto simply grinned. He said, "Maybe we did, maybe we didn't," with a tone of knowing. Luna's mouth dropped open as she watched Naruto leave, saying, "But that is for me to know and for you to not know." Was that really what he and the captain did? A few days later, Meer and Naruto were in the Minerva's hangar. The previous day, they had reached Dikua. After arriving at the dock, he and Meer disembarked from the ship and began preparing for her scheduled concert performance at the base. To ensure the concert went off without a hitch, he spent the day with Meer while she got her makeup done, her microphone checked, and other details sorted out. The Minerva hangar's pink Zaku was all they needed. Naruto refused to let the concert planner fly it with one of the Zaft pilots. The Zaku would be piloted by him. After all, he was Meer's bodyguard. He then had to put on his pilot suit and board the Zaku. He had acquired the suit during one of his missions from the Orb Union. Naruto refused to wear a Zaft pilot suit, despite the concert organizer's best efforts. As they conversed, Naruto produced one of his kunai and twirled it in his hand, and the planner soon yielded. After the pink Zaku was repaired and repainted, Meer took a look at it. She was eager to perform on it and adored the way it looked. She said excitedly, "This is going to be so much fun." Naruto examined the Zaku controls and nodded. Naruto said, "I am glad you are excited," after completing his inspection of the controls. After shutting down the cockpit, he turned on the Zaku. When the Zaku was taken out of its holsters, he felt it. He extended his hand in Meer's direction. "You ready to go?" With a nod, Meer moved onto the Zaku hand. She yelled, "Let's go," and Naruto grinned. In front of the yelling fans, he exited the Minerva. The show and the concert will be the same, with Talia after the concert. On the base, Talia made her way to Chairman Durandal's office. She had just completed compiling the information she had obtained from Naruto for her report. Although she had very little time to obtain it, she scowled at how little she could get. She hoped she knew enough to be useful to the chairman. Before long, she reached her destination and knocked. Talia entered through the open door and saluted. Durandal grinned. Durandal said, "Welcome Talia," in a smooth voice. "I am glad you could come on such short notice." Talia placed her file on Durandal's desk after nodding. She said, "I wanted to get you this file as soon as possible," with a tone of contempt. Durandal took the file and nodded. His face formed a slight frown as he read it rapidly. His question was disappointed. "This was all you were able to get," he said. "Yes, Chairman," said Talia. "He is a very hard person to glean information from." Durandal gave a nod. "I understand," he said, putting the report down. Talia nodded and followed the chairman out of the room, hoping the dinner would be a success. "Thank you Talia for obtaining this information. I will use it effectively. Now, shall we head to dinner? I've invited the pilots of your ship to hear their opinions on the war." The dinner proceeds exactly as it does in the show. With Naruto and Meer strolled toward Chairman Durandal's office. After Meer returned from dinner with the Minerva's captain and pilots, he was asked to speak with the chairman. He hoped it was to inform him that his mobile suit was finished, but he wasn't sure what the chairman wanted. Although Meer smiled as she walked next to him, Naruto could tell she was anxious. He could tell she was trying to prove she was doing her job well in order to win over the chairman. Sighing, Naruto wanted to reassure the girl, but he knew it would not do her any good. Not him, but the chairman's approval was what she sought. When they reached their destination, the chairman was at his desk completing some paperwork. When he saw the two, he grinned. "Welcome," he said, getting to his feet. "I am glad you were able to come and see me." Meer grinned. "It's always an honor to talk with you, Chairman," she said with a smile. Naruto merely gave a nod. He said, "Good to see you again," with caution. Durandal said, "Please have a seat," and moved to the two couches on the office's left side. On the couch across from the chairman, Naruto and Meer sat down. While Naruto observed Durandal with a trained eye, Meer shifted a little. Durandal gave the two a smile. "I am sorry your trip here was so hectic. If I knew that there were still Earth forces in the area, I would have given you an armed escort." Naruto made every effort to avoid snorting in disdain. Calmly, Naruto said, "It was fine. We were able to make it out unharmed." Durandal remarked, "Yes, it was rather fortunate the Minerva was in the area." Meer gave a nod. "Yes, it was. We were able to arrive here safely, and I got to spend time with Athron." Durandal gave Meer a smile. "That is good," he stated earnestly. The Durandal remarks made Meer's face light up. "I am happy you are doing well, Meer." "Chairman," said Meer with a lively tone, "I want to thank you for the pink Zaku. It was amazing to perform on." "You are welcome, Meer," smiled Durandal. "I hope you will use it for all of your performances." "I would love to," exclaimed Meer. After giving a nod, Durandal turned to face Naruto. "So, Naruto," he remarked, "I want to thank you for your help with protecting the Minerva. I read the report on how you decimated the enemy. It was simply amazing." Calmly, "Just doing my job," he said. Meer would have been in danger if the Minerva had been damaged, or worse. Durandal smiled and said, "I thank you for it anyway." He reclined in his seat. "I was wondering if you would tell us more about yourself. Someone with your abilities must have many a story to tell." Naruto squinted his eyes. Flatly, "I'd rather not," he said. With a trace of annoyance in his eyes, Durandal nodded. "I can respect that," he said in response. "But, I also want to know about the man protecting Meer. It's only natural to want to know more about an exceptional individual." This caused Naruto to frown. "You know all that you need to know," Naruto shot back. "I will guard Meer with my life and that's all that matters." Durandal gave a nod. He said, "I understand that," in a tactful manner. "But don't you feel your skills would be better suited for helping the greater good?" Naruto made an effort not to chuckle. "The greater good?" he said scornfully. "Whose greater good? Yours or Zaft?" Durandal gave a headshake. When he said, "Not like that at all, I mean for all mankind, both natural and coordinator. Fighting to stop the hatred that is between us and bringing around peace." Naruto gazed incredulously at Durandal. He was more knowledgeable about hatred than anyone else, and a child was teaching him about peace. Naruto stated, "Peace is something that will never be obtained," with a tone of rage. "Humans have a great capacity for goodness and life, but hate will always be there. Hate is an endless cycle that has yet to be broken. Look at all the wars and horrible things that mankind has done. Can there truly be peace? Peace is a dream." Naruto's statement startled Durandal, who glanced at the man in front of him and saw the expression of a soldier who had seen too many battlegrounds. He anticipated hearing him claim that all he needed was money or something similar. This young man's disillusionment with peace was unexpected. Durandal said, "What an interesting point of view," with curiosity. "How did you come to that conclusion?" Naruto swore at his own outburst. For him, peace was a sensitive topic. He had seen human beings engage in war after war. In all of them, he had fought. After 4,000 years of life, he realized that his attempts to break the cycle of hatred were futile. Hatred would never go away. War would never end. There would be good people, though. Humanity would endure as long as there were more good and honest people in the world than there were hateful ones. "Let's just say, I have first-hand experience and leave it at that," said Naruto. Durandal examined Naruto and attempted to read his body language for clues, but he was unsuccessful. Saying, "Well, that is unfortunate," he joined his hands. "I was hoping you would be willing to join Zaft and help us bring peace to the world." Naruto said impatiently, "Chairman, when is my mobile suit going to be ready? I really would like it soon. It would make protecting Meer easier." "It is done," he said, a little irate at the abrupt shift in subject. "But, I was hoping to do some renegotiating on your contract with us." This caused Naruto to frown. His tone was cautious as he asked, "What type of renegotiating?" "I was hoping you and Meer would join the Minerva and you would fight with them on the front lines," he stated. Naruto grinned. "I apologize, but there will be no renegotiations," he said with a hint of humor. "My only job is to protect Meer and nothing more." Durandal grinned, nodding. "I understand as such," he said in response. "I had hoped you would help teach the other pilots on the Minerva." While listening to the discussion, Meer turned to face Naruto. "Please Naruto," she begged him. "I want the crew of the Minerva to be safe. Please renegotiate the contract. Protect me as well as the Minerva." Durandal grinned. "Thank you for the support, Meer," he said, his arrogance barely audible. Naruto turned to face Meer. He uttered the words, "If I do this, you will be brought to the battlefield," with irritation. "You will be put in danger. Is this what you want?" Meer's gaze met Naruto's. She said, "Yes, it is. I can't just sing my songs in safety. They will lose their meaning. I want to be like the real Lacus and experience battles, so my songs will reach more people." The Durandal caught Naruto's attention. He yelled, "My Sananju better be loaded on the Minerva as soon as possible, without giving a damn who heard. I will show the brats how to fight. I see you back in the room, Meer." Naruto stormed out of the room, leaving Meer and the chairman in the dark. With a smile, Durandal turned to face Meer. When he told Meer, "You played your part perfectly," he grinned broadly. "I thank you." Meer simply nodded while wearing a fake smile. "If it helps end the war, I'm more than happy to do it," she said. However, she secretly feared what might result from it. After entering his room, Naruto shut the door firmly behind him. Startled by Naruto's rage, Kyuubi turned to face him. Kyuubi approached his partner and took a seat beside him. Concerned, Kyuubi inquired, "What happened?" Naruto glanced at Kyuubi below. "The chairman and Meer have renegotiated our contract," complained Naruto. "I am now obligated to teach the brats aboard the Minerva to be better pilots as well as protect Meer." Kyuubi gave a nod. He said, "Yeah, that would be something to be mad at," with a sympathetic tone. "Did you at least get some more money or another mobile suit out of it?" Naruto smiled sheepishly at Kyuubi. Naruto said, "I kind of forgotten," in response. "I was too angry to think about it." With a sigh, Kyuubi got to his feet. His smile was sly. "Then let's get what we deserve," he said. "Teaching brats how to fight doesn't come cheap." Kyuubi smiled, and Naruto smiled back. He said, "Yes, it doesn't come cheap," and he and Kyuubi made their way back to Durandal's office. When they reached their destination, 2 door guards stopped them. One of the guards said, "I'm sorry, but the chairman is busy right now. No visitors are allowed." Naruto merely gave the guards a smile. Saying, "Q, have fun," Kyuubi nodded, a broad smile spreading across his face. "They appear appetizing," Kyuubi remarked while licking his lips. The guards' eyes were slightly frightened as they gazed at the big fox. Kyuubi joyfully leapt at the closest guard. Before long, the other guard was attempting to remove Kyuubi from his companion. Grinning, Naruto moved past the altercation and entered Durandal's office. Naruto observed Durandal sitting at his desk going through files and doing some paperwork. When Durandal looked up, he saw Naruto, somewhat surprised. He had no expectation of any guests, much less Naruto. "Welcome Naruto," he said, putting down his pen, his voice tinged with irritation. "What brings you here?" Naruto simply sat down and grinned. He said, "Hello Durandal," with a hint of arrogance. "I'm here to talk about getting paid for teaching the Minerva's pilots." "I thought you had received your payment," said Durandal, scowling. Naruto gave a nod. I have received payment for my protection job for Meer, he clarified. I have not received any payments for my upcoming job, and training doesn't come cheap. What sort of payment are you looking for? Durandal asked, his eyes narrowing. He inquired. Leaning forward in his chair, Naruto grinned and said, I am glad you asked. I want 15 million for training them. In addition, I must have total control over who goes to battle and who doesn't. That is quite an amount, Durandal said warily, adding that only the captain has the authority to determine who is permitted to engage in combat. Well, Naruto said, that's the price of being trained by the best. You also need to be directly in charge of your pilots if you want them to survive. I will make the final decision about who fights and who doesn't, but the captain will be consulted on the battle plans. But how do I know you are the best? Durandal asked, nodding. He questioned skeptically, how can you demonstrate that? Naruto laughed. That can be done quite easily, he said in a malevolent tone. I could take over this entire base and no one would be able to stop me. Durandal, who felt as though he was looking into death itself, noticed that Naruto was telling the truth as he turned to face the smug Naruto, who was surrounded by the aura of a large, menacing demon with 10 tails waving. I agree with your demands, Durandal said, trying to shake off the thought of his own death. I thank you for your time, Chairman, Naruto said, simply nodding and letting the aura fade. As soon as we are back on the ship, I will begin their training. Nodding, Durandal watched Naruto leave his office and shut the door, letting out a sigh of relief as the fear faded from his mind and starting to reconsider the choice to include Naruto in the destiny plan because Durandal liked to be in charge and Naruto was an uncontrollable individual. With Kyuubi and Naruto. After their time on the Minerva, he believed that she had learned to think for herself, but she hadn't. She had followed the chairman like a good little puppet and had put Naruto in a position he didn't want to be in. Naruto felt a little better about the situation, now that he had a nice paycheck coming his way, and all he had to deal with was his disappointment and anger with his original charge. As he walked into his room, he saw Meer in nothing but a pink nightgown, modeling the outfits while gazing at herself in the mirror. What are you doing? With a hint of rage in his voice, he inquired. When Meer heard Naruto's voice, she jumped and turned to face him. Naruto, she said, startled. What's up with you? He said it again. Well, I was going to go to Athron's room to spend the night with him, she murmured. You cannot do that, was Naruto's icy response. Why not? They must have spent intimidating time together because Atron is Lacus's fiancé, complained Meer, irritated. As your bodyguard, I cannot allow it, Naruto said. Now, get changed and get ready for bed. We are on a friendly base, so you don't need to protect me, Meer said angrily, adding, I want to spend the night with Athron. I am your bodyguard, Naruto said, his voice as distant as ice, as he approached Meer and towered over her. I will protect you from all threats, including your foolish decisions. She had never seen Naruto like this before. He was usually so flirtatious and carefree, but now he was cold and frightening, and she didn't like it. Meer tried to move past him, but he blocked her way, so she backed away from him and collapsed onto the bed in terror. As he opened the door, Naruto turned and walked toward it. You are not to leave the room, he said, adding that Kyuubi would be watching over you to ensure you stayed in the room. Enjoy your evening, Meer said, frowning as Naruto left the room. Why was he treating her so coldly? Tsunade had the right idea about alcohol, Naruto had to admit. It was a great way to pass the time and forget about your problems. Unfortunately, he was never able to get drunk, but it did allow him to flirt more with the barmaid. Naruto left the room and headed down toward the dining hall, specifically the bar, in order to calm his nerves. He ordered a beer, sat down on the bar stool, and sighed as he picked up the bottle in front of him and took a swig. He put down his drink and said, what a day, wishing that the work would be easier and that he could just get by. He didn't want to go into this war in the first place, not after what he had lost in the last one. She was one of the few women who had managed to get past his defenses. She had fought in the last battle and almost died, but Naruto saved her at the last second, and now she was in a coma back at his base, most likely never to awaken. Naruto finished his beer and ordered another. He hated war, but it was inevitable. Human nature always led to war, and the best humankind could do was to try to understand each other and work toward mutual understanding. Wars destroyed lives, families, and friendships, and Naruto had lost so many friends over the years that he couldn't keep track of them all. He could still remember storming the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, watching his friends and comrades fall to enemy fire, and he could still smell the blood that covered his sword when he fought with the Roman legions. War had molded Naruto into the man he was, and it continues to haunt him to this day. There was nothing like drinking and remembering your life after a long day. Naruto had 7 empty beer bottles in front of him and he was still going. He was the only person left at the bar and the barmaid was starting to worry about the blonde. Most people would be falling down drunk after that many beers, but Naruto didn't even seem tipsy. To all the fallen, he said, raising his beer into the air, and many of the soldiers around him heard him say, and raised their glasses in kind. Is there another one I can have? As he placed his 8th empty bottle on the bar, Naruto posed the question. With caution, the bartender said, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm fine, Naruto said nonchalantly, grinning. I'm still perfectly sober. Prove it, the bartender said accusingly, shaking her head. Yes, my lady, Naruto said, grinning slyly. What are you asking me to do? After giving it some thought, the bartender said, all right, I'll believe you if you can juggle 3 of the bottles you just drank for 5 minutes straight. For you, drop just 1 bottle. Shall you time this for me, my dear? Naruto asked, grinning and taking 3 bottles, relishing every second of it. The barmaid nodded and glanced at her watch, saying, you may start, now. Naruto started his task, smiling as he watched the bottles fly through the air, enjoying the pleasant diversion and putting a smile on the lovely barmaid's face. He soon started performing tricks with the bottles, and the barmaid watched in awe. Before long, the time limit had arrived, and the barmaid was clapping. With an enthusiastic tone, Naruto said, thank you, I'll be here all week, after catching the bottles and bowing deeply. A voice behind Naruto said, that was certainly a fun performance, and he turned to see Izalia Jewel in front of him. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the performance, Naruto said in a flirtatious tone as he put the bottles down and approached Izalia. It was amusing, Izalia said, simply laughing. I never expected for such an experienced mercenary to be able to juggle. Well, you will never know when you have to pretend to be a juggler in order to infiltrate an enemy camp, Naruto grinned. She responded sarcastically, well then, you are certainly prepared, asking why Lacus Klein's bodyguard was down in the bar without protecting his charge. Straight to the point, said Naruto, laughing, I like that in a woman. Respond to the query? Izalia answered. Lacus is fine, he said calmly, and my partner is currently watching her in her room. He is an extremely competent fox. Izalia gave Naruto a startled look as she asked, did you say a fox? She inquired. Of course I did, he said, smiling foxily, but why is a member of the plant's Supreme Council at the bar? I just here to relax, Izalia said with a smile as she sat down at the bar. Do you want some companionship? Naruto smiled earnestly as he asked. I would love some, she said, looking at Naruto with an unreadable expression on her face. She had to admit that he was different from any man she had ever met, even though she had only met him twice so far. The first time was accidental, but it had made an impression on her. From what she could tell, he was very different. He was serious and strong when necessary, but he could also be a total goofball. With a broad smile on his face, Naruto sat down next to her and said, so, should we begin with a drink? With a flirtatious tone, he asked. She said, I would love one, while Naruto placed an order for 2 drinks. So, why did you travel to Dikua? While they awaited their drinks, Naruto posed the question. She sighed as their drinks were placed in front of them. Work, she said. Well, that sounds like so much fun, Naruto said. Have you seen anything fascinating while working? Well, I can't talk about that, Izalia said, glancing at Naruto. That's classified. You can trust me, Naruto said in a childlike voice while making his best puppy dog eyes. That's the first time someone's tried puppy dog eyes to get information from me, Izalia said, giggling as she glanced at Naruto with a hint of amusement on her face. But, it won't work on me. Naruto halted his trick. Well, it was worth a shot. Izalia sipped her drink and shook her head. She enjoyed the change of pace from her daily schedule. The two simply grinned at one another and carried on their conversation all night. A few days later the ship was preparing for their departure when Luna Maria and Myron boarded. Luna had spent most of the time shopping with Myron and had thoroughly enjoyed her time at the base. She attempted to locate Lacus and Naruto, but they appeared to be occupied. Unfortunately, Naruto would no longer be on the Minerva, so she would never have the opportunity to speak with him and ask him for advice on the battlefield. Myron observed that Luna was remarkably quiet as they made their way to their quarters. Hey sis, she said, her voice tinged with worry. Are you okay? Luna gave her sister a perplexed look. Her response was, I am fine, why do you ask? Myron clarified, you seem a little quieter than usual, is something on your mind? The fact that her sister could read her like a book made Luna smile. Her response was, you've got me. I just wanted to speak with Naruto one more time before we departed. Myron gave a nod. Her words, he is a very interesting person. Luna gave a nod. She said, that he is, as they walked into their shared room. A knock was heard as the two were unpacking their new belongings and talking about the newest styles. Luna went to the door and opened it. Shin was standing there. He said, "Hey Luna," in his typical voice. "The captain wants to see us in the hangar as soon as possible." Luna gave a nod. She said, "Okay, let's go," as she and Shin left her room and headed to the hangar area. She saw Ray, Athron, and the newcomer, Hina, standing together, anticipating their arrival. Luna approached the other pilots since the captain had not yet arrived. She saw a big red machine next to her Zaku as she was walking. She wondered who the pilot was because it was very different from any other mobile suit she had seen. Athron waved to her and Shin when he saw they had arrived. "Hey guys." "Hey Athron." Luna smiled in response. "Do you know why the captain called us here?" Athron gave a headshake. "I have no idea," he shrugged in response. Luna sighed in disappointment and nodded. They soon noticed Naruto walking next to the captain as she approached them. Luna was taken aback. She believed that Naruto would continue her tour while staying on the base with Lacus. The fact that he was on the ship surprised her. Standing at attention with the other pilots, she had little time to think about this. In front of the groups, the captain came to a stop. "At ease," the woman commanded. "I called you here today to inform you that Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and Lacus Klein will be joining us on the ship for the foreseeable future. Also, Naruto will be training all of you to be better pilots. He will also have full control of who will sortie in all future battles." "What?" exclaimed Shin. "Why is he in charge of us? He is not even part of Zaft." "Shin," said Captain Gladys in a firm voice. "Calm down, the chairman has hired him to train you and as a stipulation, he asked that he have complete control over who goes into battles." Shin felt Ray's hand on her shoulder. "Calm down Shin," he said peacefully. "If the chairman is the one who set this up then he must have had a good reason." Shin simply nodded while giving Naruto a furious glare. Luna was both excited and surprised that Naruto would remain on the ship. She was eager to learn from him because she had witnessed firsthand his skill in combat. When Athron learned that Naruto would be training them, she did see the color fade from his face. Did he have knowledge that they did not? Naruto grinned. "I know it comes as a shock to some of you that an outsider is going to be training you. But understand, I will be training you to be the best pilots you can be," he said with a sense of trust. "It will be gun tour. I mean training you to be the best. So, let's all get along and it will be a great experience for us all." "I have a question," said Luna. "Since you are going to be training us, will you be participating in battles?" "I will," said Naruto. "What unit will you be flying?" He said, "I will be piloting that," indicating the device that was adjacent to Luna's Zaku. "That is MSN.06S Sananju, which is my mobile suit." The pilots shook their heads when Captain Gladys asked, "Does anyone else have any more questions? Well then, I will leave you in Naruto's capable hands." As Captain Gladys left, everyone watched. Naruto grinned as he saw her vanish from the hangar. He said, "Now then, we shall start training now," with a hint of excitement. "I want you to meet me on the ship's deck in 5 minutes." The pilots all watched as Naruto abruptly disappeared from their line of sight. Luna exclaimed in a startled tone, "How does he do that?" To no one in particular. The other pilots were already racing toward the deck of the ship. Not wanting to let their new trainer down, Luna simply sighed and ran after the other pilots. In an effort to reach their destination on time, every pilot raced through the ship. The majority of the crew thought it was pretty funny to watch the Reds race through the corridors while attempting to avoid running over the other crew members. When the 5 of them finally reached the designated spot, Naruto was seated on the ground with 2 piles of empty bowls surrounding him. Naruto kept eating his ramen while glancing up at the panting crowd. He glanced at his watch slowly. Naruto said, "You're 30 seconds late," in a tone of boredom. "If we were in a battle, and you were on the other side of the ship, it would have been destroyed by now." Shin said, "You don't know that," with a tone of anger. "I ran that route all the time in the last battles, and we won." "You were lucky," says Naruto. "Many of the battles you have won have been luck." When Luna heard this, she scowled. "We had all fought our hardest and we won. How is that luck?" Coldly, "I agree with Luna," Ray said. Naruto said, "Okay, let's review your battles," and took out a file. The pilots stared at Naruto in disbelief as he went over each battle and outlined every aspect of their fighting strategy. First things first, we have the battle at Armory 1. Shin was against the Chaos, Gaia, and Abyss. He was able to hold his own against the Gaia, but was almost taken out by the Chaos. It was only due to the timely intervention of Athron that he wasn't killed. From there, each battle you won was with luck. Shin tried to come up with a counter-argument to everything Naruto said, but she was at a loss. "Now, can you please explain to me how your success so far was not luck?" said Naruto. You may be some of the best pilots in Zaft, but that means nothing if you don't win. So far, you have won every battle, but that can change in an instant. I am here to make sure that it never happens. You will be the best. It will be hard work, but it will help you survive. That is what I'm here to train you for. First, we are going to have a test. Surprised, Luna said, a test? What kind of test? Naruto merely grinned. Naruto said, oh, just a simple survival test, and got to his feet. Naruto got up, collected his bowls of ramen, and left the pilots alone on the ship deck to reflect. Be ready for fun tomorrow. The following day, in a wooded area close to the base, Luna Maria, Shin, Athron, Rei, and Hina were standing in front of Naruto. Naruto had obtained authorization to train there. They became perplexed when they realized they were missing their mobile suits. Shouldn't they be using mobile suits for training if they were going to do it? Gazing at his charges, Naruto grinned. Naruto said, welcome, my pretties, to survival training, with a commanding tone. I have a table that has all of the gear you will need to participate in this exercise. The ammunition is paralyzing rounds for the guns. The majority of the pilots silently agreed with Luna Maria when she said, Naruto, why are we not training with our mobile suit? Very good question, smiled Naruto in response. His response caused all of the pilots to palm their faces. The reason we are not training in mobile suits is a secret. He's crazy, thought every pilot. Naruto extracted 4 bells by reaching behind him. After saying, these are your objectives, Naruto started. Each of you must get a bell to be able to sortie in any of the upcoming battles. Hina frowned and said, there are only 4 bells. Very observant, said Naruto, grinning. There are only 4 bells, so one of you will not be able to sortie at all. What? Exclaimed Shin. You can't do that. Yes I can, a smiling Naruto replied. Remember, I have control over who sorties or not. So, suck it up and get a bell. Now, gear up. Everyone picked up their weapons and moved to the gear table. They all grabbed a pistol and some ammunition. Taking a combat knife, Luna and Athron slipped it into a side holster. After completing their equipment, everyone was standing in front of Naruto. Naruto gazed at everyone and their equipment with assurance. He said, now that everyone is ready, let's begin, and took an oven timer from the kitchen. You have 3 hours to try and get the bells off me. Just remember to look what is underneath. You may begin. Everybody aimed their weapons at Naruto and started shooting. As the bullets passed him, Naruto simply grinned and vanished. They all scowled and looked for the blonde. Luna came to the conclusion that he's probably in the forest. Rei said, I think you're right, and started to move toward the trees. Luna, Athron, and Hina were left alone in the clearing as Shin trailed closely behind Rei. Hina said, I don't like this, in a grave voice. There is something off about this test. I feel the same, concurred Athron. After listening to the more experienced pilots, Luna started to consider everything Naruto had mentioned to her. Looking at what's underneath is the one thing that caught her attention. She thought about the phrase but was unable to understand its meaning. She let out a sigh and turned to face the trees, realizing how seasoned Naruto was. She looked at Hina and Athron. Her words were, I think we should work together. The words, I take point, Hina said. Everyone nodded in agreement, and the 3 of them entered the forest. Luna, you cover the rear, and Athron, you have the sides. They were unaware that Naruto had been observing and listening to them from across the clearing. He was pleased that 3 of the 5 had understood the test's actual purpose without even trying to figure it out. Naruto grinned malevolently and said, now it's time to play, before disappearing into the darkness. With Shin always kept his gun in front of him as he moved through the forest. As soon as he had stepped into the forest, he had lost sight of Rei. He took his time walking and listened carefully for anything unusual. He needed to get the bells because he knew Naruto could be anywhere in the forest. All he had to do was aim for Naruto first. As he searched the forest for any indications of his target, Shin muttered, where could that guy be? A voice from behind said, hi, and Shin turned quickly to shoot the voice. Shin was suddenly gunless and on his back. Naruto told Shin, good reaction, as he stood above him. Shin rolled away, glaring at Naruto. Shin said, damn you, and hurried to his feet. His gun was on the ground behind Naruto when he turned to look for it. With a cunning grin, Naruto questioned, now what will you do? Shin simply scowled at Naruto while attempting to locate his gun. Let's begin lesson 1. Naruto gestured to Shin to approach him. Without an invitation, Shin rushed ahead. As Shin pulled his fist back and attempted to strike Naruto in the face, Naruto watched. With ease, Naruto parried the blow and gave Shin a knee to the stomach. Shin had never felt someone strike him so forcefully before, and he felt the air leave his body. It didn't hurt this much most of the time when he sparred with other members of Zaft. It was quite another to be kneed by Naruto. Shin stepped back from Naruto and tried to find a way around him without confronting him. He dashed into the trees and attempted to avoid Naruto, but Shin was soon hanging upside down after his foot snagged on something. Naruto said, "Lesson 1, in an authoritative voice." Shin scowled at Naruto as he left, evil laughter resonating through the forest, saying, "Always watch your surroundings. You may never know when a rope trap is on the ground waiting to snag you." Shin was filled with fear for his fellows and searched for a means of descending. After some time, appeased, Naruto stood before the 5 Zaft pilots. He had found the training exercise enjoyable, but the others did not share that sentiment. Shin was muttering obscenities while tethered to a log. Rei's arms hung loosely at his sides, both covered in mud and dirt. Aphron had been shot with 2 full clips of paralyzing bullets and was lying face down on the ground, unable to move. Luna appeared to have been struck by lightning because her hair was standing up on its ends. Hina's legs were feelingless and covered in orange paint. Naruto smiled and said, "So, none of you were able to get a bell, that's a shame. I was hoping at least one of you could put a scratch on me." "You're evil," yelled Aphron. "Why thank you," said Naruto gleefully. "Now, none of you were able to get the bell, but 3 of you were able to grasp the true meaning of the test without knowing it." Luna inquired, "What do you mean?" "Teamwork was the test's true meaning," Naruto stated solemnly. Rei and Shin went it alone and, as you can see, paid dearly for it. You worked together with Aphron and Hina. Even though you didn't fare as well as Rei and Shin, you 3 worked together and tried your best to get the bells. If you take one thing away from this test, it is this. Those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Naruto got to his feet and turned to face the pilots in front of him. He said, "Meet me on the ship when you guys get the feeling back in your bodies," and turned to leave. "We have some tough training ahead of us." Talia sighed wearily as she perused the reports before her. Naruto had been in charge of the pilots for a few days, and she had heard complaints about his training style from every pilot. When she opened the following report, she discovered that Naruto would occasionally show up close to the pilots and hurl rubber balls at them. He claimed that this was done as part of his dodging training. Unfortunately, Naruto spent the next 2 days in the medical bay after Shin attempted to attack him after 3 days of this. Why does he do these things? Talia asked herself, putting down the report and frantically running her hand through her hair while thinking about the blonde mercenary aboard. He was definitely different from everyone else she had met. He was flirtatious, playful, and all around carefree, but he was also dangerous, serious, and extremely perceptive. He always seemed to be 5 steps ahead of everyone and everything, in her opinion. "Yes," she said authoritatively as she picked up the receiver when her desk comm rang. Naruto's joyful voice called out, "Hi Talia." Over the comm, "How are you?" For a brief moment, Talia remained silent as she wondered how he had gained access to her private communication channel. "I am doing well, Naruto," she said dryly while sitting upright at her desk. "May I ask the reason for your call?" "Would you please come join me here on the outer deck to enjoy a wonderful sunrise?" he inquired. Talia thought about this. She needed to provide the chairman with more details about the blonde, but she was also required on the bridge because that was the day they were departing for the next base. She gave it some more thought before making her choice. She said calmly, "I'm sorry, Naruto," and rose from her desk. "I have to get to the bridge." "If you come, I promise you won't regret it," he said meekly. She was able to visualize the broad smile on his face. Talia let out a sigh and checked the time. She could spend some time with him on the outer deck and learn more about him. "I will come, but I can only stay for 15 minutes, she responded. "That is all I need," he exclaimed with excitement. "See you soon." After hanging up the phone, Talia completed preparing for the day. She carried her captain's hat as she left her room. As she passed by, many of the crew members saluted her. The door to the outer deck soon appeared, and she would return the salute. She got ready in her mind and stepped out onto the deck. She noticed Naruto standing close to the rail's end, with a table a short distance away. He was dressed as usual, with the exception that his weapons were missing. He smiled warmly at Talia as he turned to face her. As he said, "I am happy you could join me, Talia." His face was filled with joy and happiness. Talia simply nodded, allowing a tiny, hardly perceptible smile to appear on her face. After guiding her to the table, Naruto showed her the appetizing-looking breakfast that had been prepared. She took a seat after he pulled out a chair. Only 2 candles were able to help light the table because it was still a little dark outside. As she examined the various foods in front of her, she inquired, "Where did you get such a wonderful meal?" The ship did not have most of them. As he picked up his knife and fork, Naruto simply smiled cheekily at her and said, "I have my ways." Talia looked at him curiously and said, "And those ways are?" As he began to eat, Naruto simply continued to smile and said, "Now that would be telling." As she observed Naruto, she declared authoritatively, "I will have you removed if you brought contraband on my ship." He simply continued to smile while turning to face her. He put his utensils down, put his elbows on the table, and rested his chin on his fists before saying simply, "I promise I haven't brought anything that is bad on the ship. You can trust me." Naruto's face brightened even more when Talia gave him a neutral look and said, "For next time please inform me you will be bringing things on the ship, okay?" He picked up his knife and fork once more and said, "Next time. Well, if you insist, Captain, but it will be dinner then." Talia simply glared at him, her cheeks blushing slightly. SB. Naruto simply sat at his desk and went over more of the pilot's battle data. He developed a variety of simulations that he wanted them to experience in order to improve their teamwork. They had a simple defense strategy in place to keep the ship safe. Typically, Rei and Luna would remain on or close to the ship while Shin and Aphron went out to eliminate the enemy's main forces. It had been effective thus far, but they would be overwhelmed if the enemy were very many. For instance, the conflict that took place close to the country of Orb. Better formations and battle plans were available for the impending battles now that he and Hina were aboard the ship. He did need to work on some emotional problems with his pilots, particularly Shin. Shin was impulsive and emotional, allowing things that no longer mattered to bother him. He harbored a deep-seated resentment toward Orb and wanted to attribute all of his troubles to him. He appeared to believe everything the chairman and Rei said and didn't think much for himself. It was necessary for him to face his issues, realize that good people do suffer, and let go of his family's passing. Rei came next. He was the quintessential follower of the chairman. Despite his intelligence and slyness, there was something strange about him. It appeared that he put himself in a position that he ultimately couldn't fulfill. In that regard, the other pilots he had were quite ordinary. Aphron got along well with the other pilots and was an excellent fighter. He detested getting into arguments with friends for no apparent reason. In addition to helping to bring more balance to the group alongside Aphron, Hina was just an ordinary person who did his best to help others. Last but not least was Lunimera, a determined young woman who gave everything she had. Her sense of right and wrong was very strong. They were excellent people all around and understood teamwork well, but they still needed more to be truly exceptional. As he allowed the simulations to develop, he shut down his computer and turned to see Meer playing with her Haro while seated on her bed. Since they had returned to the ship, she had stayed in the room most of the time without asking to see Aphron or do anything else. Her eyes were filled with fear as she glanced up at him for a moment before quickly averting her gaze. With a sigh of understanding, Naruto got up and approached Meer. With his hands by his sides, he asked her calmly, "Can I take a seat?" He slipped down beside her after Meer glanced up at him and nodded slowly. He watched her as she tried to think of the right thing to say while looking down at her Haro. At last, it dawned on him. His words were straightforward. "Meer, I am sorry." With pain visible in her eyes, Meer turned to face him. She questioned, "Why were you so cold to me?" With fatigue in his voice, Naruto looked at her gravely and said, "You forced me into a situation I did not wish to be in. I did not want to get involved any more in this war than I already am." "You're not involved," she said, sounding a little perplexed. "All you're doing is training the pilots to be better." With a sigh, Naruto said, "There is more than just training them, Meer," while meeting her gaze. "I will be in battle. Fighting to protect you. This new job puts you more at risk, and as your protector I have to make sure you are safe." "That's okay," Meer said simply, nodding. "You're just fighting the Earth forces, that's all. They're the ones who started this." Naruto suppressed his growing rage at Meer's remarks. He realized that she was approaching the matter from the chairman's point of view and truly had no idea what war meant. He took a moment to collect his thoughts before turning his gaze away from her. "They're not just the Earth forces," he responded. "They're people. Just like you and me, fighting for what they believe is right. Well, what they are fighting for is wrong. The chairman wants to bring peace and they keep on wanting to fight," she said with confidence. "If they would listen to the chairman, everything would be all right." Naruto got up and moved in the direction of the door. "Meer, just know that I am sorry for the way I treated you earlier," he said quietly, "but just remember there is more to this war than meets the eye." After leaving the room, Naruto left Meer to consider what he had said. Wondering what Naruto meant, she glanced down at Haro. In an attempt to speak with Kyuubi, she glanced at him as he slept on his dog bed, but he was not there. As she considered what her protector had said, she sighed and sang softly to herself. SB. After leaving Meer in their room, Naruto proceeded down the corridor in the direction of the hangar. Though she wasn't prepared, He wished she would listen to him more and consider this conflict from a different angle. She would need a little more time to warm up. As he entered the hangar, with many of the employees moving about, he combed his hair. Knowing that they were all full of hope for a better future, he watched them all as they gave it their all. However, like him, many would not see it or learn the cost of that future. As he moved toward his machine, which was positioned next to the Goof and Zaku's, he let that thought go. He climbed onto the lift pad and swiftly entered the machine's cockpit. He started testing the systems and other things. She had discovered no hidden kill switches in the system, despite the fact that he had previously installed Tenten to check for them. You can never be too careful, so he still checked every inch of the Sanaju. As he reviewed system after system, he quickly lost himself in his work, which helped him to relax about everything that was happening. With a sigh of satisfaction, he stretched his arms above his head after finishing the checks. A voice called out from outside his machine, "Commander Naruto." Naruto went outside and peered down. One of the mechanics was standing there, he noticed. Ignoring the commander part, he went down to the mechanic and stepped level with him, asking, "What is it?" Under Naruto's intense stare, the mechanic shifted slightly. "Well, we were wondering," he said, his voice trailing off. "Wondering what?" Naruto asked, seeking clarification as a ramen craving struck. When the mechanic was at a loss for words, his friend stepped in to help him. He was wondering if you could as Miss Lacus if she would be willing to sing a song for us. He stated simply, "We think a lot of the crew would like it." Naruto just nodded and gave it some thought. It might help to get Meer in a better mood and to brighten the mood on the ship. "I think Lacus would be fine to sing for you a bit, but you have to get it cleared by the captain first," he said. The mechanics grinned and nodded, saying, "We will ask her right away," before hurriedly leaving while yelling at one another. When Naruto noticed Shin up in the pilot's locker room, he simply grinned and turned to go back to his room. When Naruto realized he was by himself, he made the decision to go talk to his youthful, attractive head. He headed for the elevator and ascended to the changing area. With a pink cell phone in his hand, Shin sat on one of the benches and gazed out into the hangar. Naruto approached him and took a seat beside him. With hatred visible in his eyes, Shin swiveled his head and gave Naruto a fierce look. His tone was harsh as he asked, "What do you want?" "Can't I speak to one of my pilots?" Naruto asked in a phony offended tone as he gazed out into the hangar. He politely said, "I am a pilot for Zaft, not one of yours," as his left hand gradually clenched into a fist. "You're one of my pilots as well," Naruto shot back, leaning back and bracing his arms against the opposite bench. He simply laughed. "I am your trainer after all." Shin turned his attention from Naruto to his machine. After observing him for a short while longer, Naruto straightened up once more. "Shin," he began, "what made you decide to become a pilot?" This question took Shin a little by surprise, but that moment passed. With conviction, he declared, "I joined Zaft to stop war. To stop tragedies from happening to good people." At least Shin's heart was in the right place, so Naruto nodded. "I can get behind that," was his kind response. "But here is another question, does that mean stopping tragedies for only the people you care for and causing it for others, or to stop it for all people?" A thoughtful expression appeared on Shin's face. Naruto got up slowly, stretched, and shot Shin a straightforward glance. He waved to him as he made his way to the elevator, saying, "When you have an answer for that question let me know, okay?" SB. While the pilots worked on the simulations he had created for them, Naruto stood outside the simulators. After using all of their skills, he created a new formation for them, which they were now practicing. The plan was for Rei, Shin, and himself to guard the ship while Athron, Hina, and Luna would be the front line fighters attacking the enemy directly. Naruto said he would either sortie or stay in this formation. Despite Shin's dissatisfaction, he was happy to see that Luna was killing the majority of the enemy in the simulator and was demonstrating her abilities as a frontline fighter. Athron covered the left side of the battlefield and, as usual, proved to everyone why he is among the best pilots there. She had a few near misses, but Hina had saved her. He turned to face Shin and could tell by the way he fought that he was unhappy with his decision to stick with the Minerva. His actions conveyed his rage, and he killed enemies mercilessly whenever they came within range of his gun. As he performed his duties with accuracy, Naruto turned to face Rei and let out a sigh. They had generally gotten better, and the majority of them had become comfortable in their new positions. In order to end the simulation, Naruto typed rapidly on the computer and waited for the pilots to join him. Everyone gathered in front of him after filing out of their individual simulators. He crossed his arms over his chest and said, "Good job everyone," in a professional manner. "You did well in the simulator, keep it up and you'll be ready for a real fight in no time. Luna, you had the most enemy shot down, which is great, but you had a few moments where you could have been taken out yourself. Remember to communicate when you are pushing OK. Other than that, you all did great. Dismissed. The pilots filed out after saluting, but just as they were about to do so, the battle alarm went off. Before long, everyone was on board, and the pilots were off like lightning to their machines. Naruto got on the comms and boarded his Sananju. When he made contact with the bridge, Mayreen showed up on his screen. As he moved his machine to the back of the Minerva to cover that area, he inquired, "What's the situation?" She quickly pulled up a map of the area and said, "A large fleet of ships have been detected in the area. We have identified them as a fleet of Orb Union ships and Earth forces." This was not something Naruto was pleased to see, and he scowled. It appeared that Orb was now collaborating with the Earth forces, which meant there would be more adversaries to defeat. Shin would also be more likely to defy authority and go it alone. He turned to face Shin after hearing him say, "Those bastards," over the comms. Hatred and disgust filled Shin's face. "I'll destroy them all." Naruto turned to face Shin, his expression hardened by battle. "You will do as we have planned, you will protect the ship and not leave it," he said. "Is that understood?" With a low growl coming from his throat, Shin glared at Naruto and said, "Yes sir." He then severed his connection with Naruto. Naruto glared at Ray as he turned his comm to face him. He closed his eyes to hide his rage and said politely, "You are to make sure he does as ordered." Ray nodded and said, "Understood sir." With a reassured expression on his face, Naruto opened his eyes and nodded. All of the pilots confirmed his statement, now everyone, saying, "The enemy we are facing are many, but we can win the day, also don't die on me, got it?" As the suit was loaded onto the catapult, Naruto sealed his helmet. With a cry of, "Naruto Uzumaki launching," he leapt from the ship and flew into the sunlight, his Sananju red. He positioned himself at the Minerva's back and waited for everyone to line up. With Earth forces, Neil watched the Minerva in front of them from the bridge of his ship. They had joined forces with a fleet from Orb to destroy that ship for good. The other pilots, including Stella, were in their machines. The forces of the Orb were waiting for orders. Their forces were commanded by Unisiren, who appeared very keen to engage in combat. Neil, however, was a little nervous about this impending conflict. He had the unshakable impression that something had changed on the Minerva. He saw the Minerva's mobile suits emerge as he zoomed in. In addition to the 4 he had previously fought, 2 new members had joined the group. He didn't worry too much about the orange machine. Although it was a more recent model, his forces were able to handle it. However, it was the red suit that made him feel uneasy, as if a monster had arrived and they needed to flee. He put the idea out of his head and concentrated on the battlefield. "Have all machines launch," he instructed. "Have Stella and the other focus on taking out the mobile suits. All other machines are to attack the ship directly." With the Minerva as the enemy mobile suits launched and approached the Minerva, Talia watched. Among the units were the Chaos and Gaia, and the Orb mobile suits soon joined them. Even though she was saddened to learn that Orb was now an enemy, she continued to perform her duties. The bridge came to life when she gave the order, "Load Tannhauser, have Tierstan and Isod primed and ready to fire." Kyubi stood next to Arthur as he sat in his chair. After Kyubi informed him that he would be assisting, Arthur reluctantly agreed after recalling the previous incident. To concentrate their first volley, Kyubi selected 2 ships from the side. Arthur yelled, "Fire!" as the computer entered the targets. The powerful shots from the Minerva's main guns roared to life. The 2 enemy ships were severely damaged and one was sunk after receiving multiple direct hits. While they watched the damaged ship retreat, they were distracted by the nearby ship's fire. With the pilots with the flight unit now attached to her unit, Luna was able to hover in midair while aiming her beam rifle at the enemy. She dodged many of the shots they fired at her, retaliating and eliminating 2 wingdoms in the process. 2 Orb Masumis swooped past her, forcing her to sidestep. They were destroyed when she swiftly spun around and threw another wave of beams at them. She had the sudden urge to dodge, so she did. 3 beam blasts passed through where she had been as she moved. She shot down 3 more mobile suits, thinking to herself, "I guess Naruto's dodging training has helped." Over the comms, Athron's voice said, "Luna, beware of the Gaia." Luna nodded and fired a volley of missiles at another Wingdom squadron, saying, "Thanks Athron, I will." Shin stood on the Minerva's right side during this time, eliminating adversaries with his beam rifle. Before moving on to the Wingdoms, he would always remove the orb suits. With every shot, his rage increased. "These bastards," he told himself as he used his shields to block some beams. Ray came on the comms just as he was ready to launch into the main battle line after priming his thrusters. "Shin, remember you are to protect the ship." This just made Shin growl. As his hands gripped the controls more tightly, he answered, "I know that." His mind is returning to the memories of his family's deaths. He let go of the controls and concentrated on the work at hand. Naruto had heard the conversation and was relieved that Rei had managed to regain Shin's attention. As he observed the remainder of the battle, he shot down a couple of mobile suits. Only a few mobile suits managed to get through. Athrun and Hina held their positions well, and Luna was doing fantastically and covering the middle. Those who were fortunate enough to escape them met their demise at the hands of Shin and Rei, who would swiftly eliminate them once they were through. On the bridge, Talia was pleased with how the battle was going as she watched it. The ship appeared more than prepared to take on this foe with Hina and Naruto aboard. Her face took on a determined expression as she concentrated on the fleet. "Let's blast through them," she said. "Arthur, fire the Lohengrin." Arthur prepared the Lohengrin for fire by simply nodding and responding, "Yes, ma'am." As soon as the Lohengrin was prepared to fire, Talia turned to face her adversaries. "Fire." With Naruto, when he noticed that the Lohengrin was about to fire, he shot down another wingdom as it passed. When he saw a flash of black, blue, and white flies fly by, he turned quickly to see it fire at the Lohengrin's side, halting its firing. Rei was thrown into the water as a result of the massive explosion that occurred at the ship's bow. When Naruto had a clear view of the machine, he demanded, "What the hell?" Naruto scowled even harder when he realized it was the Freedom. He was dating his daughter, so he knew the pilot very well. He yelled, "Yamato," as he started to rise and turn toward the Freedom. When Naruto approached the Freedom, he slammed his shield into it and sent it hurtling down. The Freedom had all of its guns trained on all of the nearby mobile suits. As he turned, he saw a large twin-legged ship behind a red mobile suit approaching him. He kicked the red mobile suits away after easily avoiding their attack. He pulsed his chakra as he floated there. Before long, he sensed that Lacus was on board the twin-legged ship, along with two individuals who appeared to be using chakra. His eyes narrowed as this startled him a little. As he identified the two chakra signatures, he told himself, no one should be using chakra. One wore a changeable black mobile suit, while the other wore a green mobile suit with two deployable guns. He mentally noted that he needed to learn more about their chakra usage, but first he focused on the unwelcome visitor. Talia demanded, "Naruto, what is going on?" as he faced the new enemy in the center of the battlefield. With anger in his voice, he answered, "I am about to find out. You and the others focus on the battle. I want all suits to stay away from the black and green mobile suits. Is that understood?" "Roger," he received from every pilot but Shin. The Freedom appeared and blasted its beams at him just as he was ready to call Shin. After swerving past the first two, Naruto used his shield to block the remaining ones. He snarled as he turned to face the Freedom. He said, "You better explain yourself, Yamato," and rushed forward with his beam saber drawn. On the Archangel, as Kira plunged into the battle with Kigali at her heels, Captain Maru Romius sat in her chair and watched. Kigali almost went crazy when they learned about the impending battle and pleaded with them for assistance in putting an end to it. They had come as fast as they could to put an end to the altercation between the two sides after agreeing. She saw Kira successfully halt the Minerva's Tannhauser attack on the Earth Force's fleet, but he was quickly taken by surprise by a red mobile suit. They had never seen a model like it before. Kigali attempted to strike it, but it pushed her away. The thrusters of the red mobile suit held steady as it floated in midair. Abruptly, she heard Lacus give a little gasp. She turned to see a startled and terrified expression on her face. "Lacus," Maru uttered worriedly, "what is wrong?" Lacus put her left hand over her right and said, "I know who the pilot of that red mobile suit is." Maru nodded, astonished that Lacus had discovered their opponent so rapidly. "Who is it?" The whole crew stopped when she said, "It's Naruto." "You don't mean," Maru said, startled and trembling a little. As she watched Kira attack Naruto, Lacus nodded and said, "Yes, that is my father, all right." With Naruto using his beam saber, Naruto deflected the Freedom's attack and kicked him away. He struck the Freedom's arm with his blade, but Kira was able to avoid the blow in time. In order to put some distance between him and Naruto, the Freedom flew back. Naruto opened a channel of communication with the Freedom and started typing rapidly. "What the hell, Yamato?" Kira Yamato gazed into the irate face of Lacus Klein's father, Naruto. "Naruto," he exclaimed, his face flushed with surprise. Naruto gave Kira a furious look. He commanded, "Answer the question, boy." For a few moments, Kira just stared in terror at Naruto. He quickly responded, "We are here to stop the fight." "Why are you here? Are you working for Zaft?" He took the Freedom by the collar and said, "I am the one asking the questions, Yamato. Why are you trying to stop this fight?" Kira was about to respond when a beam pushed Naruto away from him. He turned quickly to see the Strike Rouge pointing at him with its beam rifle. Stay away from Kira. Kigali, Kira said, his voice worried. Naruto growled in frustration as his mind gradually pieced everything together. Pointing his rifle at the Strike Rouge, he said, so you're the one behind this foolish endeavor. Leave now. Kigali cast a furious glance at Naruto's machine. No, she shot back. I have to protect my people, it's my job. After Kigali ducked out of the way of Naruto's beam, he suddenly materialized in front of her, grabbed her by the head, and smashed her suit against the Archangel's side. A beam rifle was aimed at his suit as Kira watched and attempted to assist. He said, twitching his trigger finger, don't move Yamato. I have some words for you as well. He received a hail from the Minerva as he returned his attention to Kigali. He replied, yes, Captain. With anger on her face, she demanded, what is going on up there? Who are these people? What are they doing in the battle and with that ship? As calmly as he could, he responded, they are just some people with some misguided thoughts. Why they are here is of no importance. Focus on the battle at hand. Have all pilots changed to formation G4. I will have this nuisance out of the way shortly. He disconnected the call before Talia could respond, returning his attention to Kigali. Now Atha, please tell me how stopping this battle is the correct way of protecting your people. With the Minerva, Talia turned to watch Naruto as he engaged with the Freedom and the Strike Rouge after hearing the connection cut. She could see that Naruto was in charge of things at the moment. He had his gun aimed at the Freedom and held the Rouge against the Archangel's side so that if he attempted anything, a beaming face would greet him. After turning back to the Orb and Earth Forces fleets, she turned to Myron and gave her the order, tell the pilots to switch to formation G4. Talia watched as Luna and Hina flew back toward the ship while Athron took command. Myron nodded and communicated the orders. Shin swooped forward to stand beside Athron. Now that Hina was on board, Luna assisted Rei in repositioning herself while occupying the gap between the ship and Shin and Athron. Shin and Athron started showering the enemies in front of them with fire. Athron and Shin increased their rate of fire as Luna pulled out her long-range rifle and started firing volley after volley. Hina and Rei launched a volley of missiles to intensify the assault. The enemy advancing lines were forced back by the combination of beams and missiles. Among the few suits that survived the attack were the Gaia and Chaos. The fleet was struck by the remaining attacks, with disastrous results. The Orb forces lost 2 carriers and 3 battleships, while many of the Earth Forces battleships and cruisers were destroyed. Talia grinned and turned to face Arthur and Kyubi. Provide fire support, she commanded, and both of them grinned in response. Both of them said, yes, Captain, as the Minerva's guns came alive. With Naruto, he slammed the Rouge against the Archangel's side once more and said, I am waiting for an answer, Atha. Kigali stared into Naruto's machine's face while slamming into the back of her chair. She growled in annoyance. I am here to stop the Orb forces from attacking and to retreat back home. Foolish girl. This is the dumbest way to do that. Naruto merely snorted in disdain. Kigali began to cry and exclaimed, you have no idea what I am going through. I have to protect my people. Kigali struck the other leg of the Archangel after Naruto snarled and threw her away. The Freedom stood in his way just as he was ready to charge her once more. He pointed his weapons at him and said, leave her alone. Raising his rifle at Kira, Naruto remarked, don't start with me, Yamato. I've got enough to deal with as it is. Stop fighting. A voice said over all of their communications. The image of the real Lacus Klein appeared on Naruto's screen, and he watched. She gazed at him with a worried expression on her face. Please stop fighting. Naruto could see the pain in Lacus's eyes as he looked at her. Although he detested seeing her in such grief, there was one instance in which it was necessary to do so for their own safety. He told her, retreat to a safe point, his voice losing its angry edge, I will talk with you all there. With a nod, Lacus said, thank you, with relief. With a simple nod, Naruto drifted off the ship. He turned to face Kira and Kigali and said simply, now off with you, or the real fight will begin. Kigali was about to respond as she glared at Naruto when she felt the Freedom's hand brush against her shoulder. Kira said in a calming tone, let's go. Kigali nodded slowly as she glanced at her brother. Naruto watched as the Archangel slowly turned and flew away as the two of them flew back to it. He turned to see what had transpired in the battle after letting out a little sigh. The Earth forces and Orb fleets appeared to be retreating. With only minor damage from the battle, all of the Minerva's pilots were still alive and well. He overheard Myron say, all units return, over the communications. After turning his Sananju, Naruto headed toward the Minerva. As he docked his machine in its holster, he asked himself, why did this have to get even more complicated? He had to fight to defend Meer first, then he had to deal with the Archangel and Freedom's attack. and lastly he found 2 people using chakra. He stepped out of the machine and saw Athrun approach him with a worried and angry expression. He held his helmet loosely in his hand and asked Naruto, "What happened up there?" He said, "Nothing for you to worry about, run," and made his way to the ship's locker room. Athrun touched Naruto on the shoulder. He declared resolutely, "I need to know." With noticeable irritation on his face, Naruto slowly turned to face Athrun. He answered, "This situation does not involve you at all. Now you have 2 options: let the matter drop or end up in the medical bay, your choice." Reluctantly, Athrun backed away and released Naruto's shoulder. With a weary sigh, Naruto turned to leave and went into the elevator. Before he dealt with anything, he wanted to sleep for a few hours. However, he saw Luna Maria as soon as he walked into the locker room. Telling him, "The captain called, she wants to meet with you in her quarters right away." Naruto nodded and said, "Will do." He then went to his locker, took off his pilot suit, and put his normal equipment in a holster. Luna was staring at him when he turned to face her. "Do you need anything?" After a brief period of silence, Luna smiled gratefully and said, "I just want to thank you. I was able to dodge a lot more shots thanks to your training. So yeah, thank you for being a good teacher." As he passed her, Naruto grinned and said, "I am happy to be of help." For a moment, he put his hand on her shoulder. "Keep up the good work." The office of the captain reviewing the battle data from the previous day, Talia sat at her desk. That battle had seen a lot of events. The ship suffered only minor damage from the attacking fleet, and her pilots had done a superb job. However, because the Freedom and the Archangel intervened, they were no longer able to use the Lohengrin. As she gazed at the Archangel, she asked herself, what were they doing here? Naruto had pushed the ship and mobile suits away, so she knew he would have the answers. The sound of a knock on the door jolted her out of her reverie. She said, "Come in." Naruto entered through the sliding door, approaching Talia with a broad smile on his face. He cheerfully said, "Hi Talia," as he stood in front of her desk. "What can I do for you?" Talia simply placed her hands together on the desk. Without getting bogged down in small talk, she asked, "Can you tell me why the Archangel was in our battle zone and attacked this ship?" Naruto let out a sigh. "They came on the thought of a misguided girl." He responded, "As for the reason they attacked us and everyone else, I will find that out later." Talia simply nodded and said, "Please let me know when you do." With a cheeky grin on his face, Naruto nodded. Talia felt hands on her shoulders as she watched him vanish. She looked back to see Naruto standing behind her, beginning to massage her. Carefully, he said, "You're so tense, Talia. When was the last time you relaxed?" As Talia felt Naruto's hand slide over her shoulders and release the tension that had accumulated, she suppressed a sigh of satisfaction. "Naruto," she said. She had intended to ask him to stop, but it was just so satisfying. As he placed his hands over her shoulders and gave her neck a gentle pat, he answered, "Yes, Talia." She let out a sigh of satisfaction and said, "This is not appropriate." Naruto simply laughed and carried on with the massage, saying, "I am just giving you a massage. I will stop if you promise me one thing." As he worked on a large knot in her neck, she asked, "What is the promise?" He replied with a broad smile, "It is a surprise. I promise it will not be anything that you would feel uncomfortable doing." With a sigh, Talia nodded slowly. At the conclusion of the massage, she felt a little let down when Naruto took his hand off her shoulders. "Okay," she said. "Return to the front of the desk after that." He said, "Great," and started to go to the door. "I'll let you know what we are going to do once we are back in port." Talia shook her head and watched the door close. As she contemplated what the promise would be, she thought, that man. As she concentrated on repairing the ship and preparing it for the upcoming conflict, she let that thought go. With Meer, while she waited for Naruto to come back, Meer sat on her bed. She had been hiding under the covers in her room for the majority of the battle. She could think now that the fight was over. She had been in battle twice before, and both times it was terrifying. She pondered whether she would survive the next one. The chairman had assured her that this trip would be simple. Her sole purpose was to relieve Lacus and assist in calming the populace. However, after Blue Cosmos attacked her, that changed, and she seemed to be followed by battles ever since. Naruto was the one person she had learned to rely on. He helped her, reprimanded her, shielded her, and consoled her. She had learned to rely on him in any situation. She wouldn't have looked for things on her own, but he had shown her. His advice and expertise helped her develop, and at one point she thought he was her father. When Naruto entered the room, she was jolted out of her reverie. His hand was going through his hair, and he had a weary expression. Following closely behind him, Kyuubi made his way directly to his dog bed. "Hello Naruto," she said in a kind tone as she stood. He grinned as he turned to face her. "How are you doing, Meer?" She rubbed her arm and said, "The battle was scary, but it seems that everything turned out fine." Naruto simply nodded and said, "For now." He then sat on the bed and let out a weary yawn. Meer gave him a bewildered look but ignored him. "Do you know if we will be going into battle anytime soon?" "Probably tomorrow." With a nod, Meer said, "That's soon." He gestured for Meer to take a seat beside him and said knowingly, "That is the way war works. Every day a battle takes place. Every day people die for their cause." She looked down at her hands and said, "Why do we have to fight?" As Naruto embraced her like a father, Meer felt. He replied, "It is a part of humanity. When we don't know what to do we fight, when we want our way we fight. We fight because it helps us know we're human." With a nod, Meer encircled Naruto in her arms. Although she was unable to fully comprehend everything he said, she had the feeling that she would eventually. She concluded that she could handle anything as long as Naruto was with her. After some time, Naruto held a three-pointed kunai with a seal around it as he stood on the outer deck overlooking the ocean. He easily caught the kunai after throwing it into the air. He sighed in exhaustion as his thoughts went over the day. With a flick of his wrist, he reinserted the kunai into his sleeve and raised his arms above his head. Once more, he drew the kunai and drove it into the railing. To prevent them from witnessing him use his chakra, he had Tenten hack the system. Using his phone, he asked her, "Am I good to go?" Tenten assuredly said, "All set. Unless someone physically come and check on you." "Got that covered," he said, beginning to concentrate. "I put a seal on the door that if anyone tries to open it they will forget what they are doing and go to their room." She smiled and said, "Very nice. I got you covered here, so have fun." He closed his eyes and concentrated on feeling for the other seal he had applied to Lacus. "Thanks Tenten," he said. He found it after a few minutes and grinned. In a flash of yellow, he pressed the seal and vanished from the deck. Alongside the Archangel as they reviewed the battle, everyone on the bridge stood silently. With a furious expression on her face, Kigali stood beside Kira. With her left hand clutching Kira's right in concern, Lacus stood beside her. Finally, Maru broke the silence with a sigh. She questioned, "So what now everyone?" Kira rubbed the back of his head and said, "I honestly have no idea." With the exception of Lacus and Kigali, the majority of the crew nodded in agreement. "I say we stick to the original plan and stop the orb forces from fighting," Kigali said. Lacus gave a headshake. In a level voice, she said, "We cannot pressure that course of action any longer." "Is it because of Naruto?" Maru asked, glancing at Lacus, who nodded. Kigali struck the wall's side with her fist. Angrily, she said, "I don't care if he's there. I have to stop them." Kira noticed the concern in his sister's eyes. "Kigali, I understand that you are worried for your people, but we can't be rash about this." Kigali gave Kira a fierce look, but then they saw that Lacus's hand was glowing yellow. As it grew brighter, Lacus attempted to hide it but was unsuccessful. A bright yellow flash filled the room as she said, "Oh no." Everyone noticed Naruto standing in front of them with his arms folded across his chest as the light faded. His abrupt appearance caused everyone to gasp, and soon he was the target of multiple guns. He smiled mischievously as he observed everyone. He uttered the words, "Now children, those are not toys," and vanished, only to reappear holding bullets. "I will be holding these until you can learn to use them." When he demonstrated his skill, Maru was the first to awaken. "How did you come onto this ship?" she demanded. With a simple smile, Naruto told Maru, "I am just awesome." Lacus let out a weary sigh and said, "Dad, stop messing with everyone." When Naruto flashed in, this was always what happened. With a smile on his face, he turned to face Lacus. After saying, "Good to see you, princess," he gave Lacus a firm embrace. Happy to see her second father, she returned his hug. They parted ways, and Naruto once more faced the Archangel's crew. "Now," he politely said, "please explain to me what brought you into this fight." Maru watched Naruto and said, "We have been monitoring the war from the ship for a while. I'm still uneasy about his unexpected arrival. We received word of this battle and decided to intervene." After giving a sympathetic nod, Naruto turned to face Kigali. To the surprise of everyone, he said, "So this is your fault, Atha." She glared at Naruto and demanded, "How is this fault?" Naruto simply looked at her gravely. "You are the one who failed to keep their country's stances and allowed yourself to be pushed around. Orb is neutral, Orb will not attack another nation, and Orb will not let another nation attack it. Yet now they're out there attacking the Minerva with the Earth forces. What could I have done?" She cried as she looked at the ground and yelled at him, "I have worked my hardest as the chief representative of Orb, everyone was against me." "You could have fought," he said with authority. "You are the one who makes the policies in your country. You are the one who leads the people. Lead them, do not act like a crybaby and grow a backbone. Your father never backed down from the world or his other representatives. Yet you caved so fast, and now look at you. Locked away on this ship while the Saiyans play with orb. Kira stood in front of Kigali and remarked, "That is enough, Naruto. She has been through enough." Naruto merely gave Kira a scowl. He took Kira by the collar and raised him into the air, saying, "I have a bone to pick with you as well. It's been 2 bloody years and this is the first time I've seen Lacus, so please tell me what you've been doing with my daughter, and if I don't like it there will be nothing left of you. Identify who you are." When Lacus approached Naruto and touched his shoulder, Kira writhed in his grasp. In a soothing tone, she stated, "We have been working at the orphanage. We haven't done anything. I am keeping my promise, okay?" With a sigh of relief, Naruto let go of Kira and turned to face his daughter. "That's my girl," he said with joy. She asked him, nodding, "Now why are you on the Minerva?" Everyone gasped in shock as Naruto sighed and said, "I am being paid to guard your look-alike. Also I am training the pilots." Kira frowned and said, "So you are with Zaft now?" His arms were extended above his head, and he responded, "I am currently under their employ but I am not part of their forces." "So what now?" inquired Maru. Naruto gave them a serious look. He replied, "You stay out of this battle. Your interference will cause you more trouble than you want to deal with as of now." "We may not like it," Maru said on behalf of everyone, and they all scowled. "But we will stay out of this battle." Naruto grinned. Before Lacus touched his arm, he began to concentrate his chakra. "That's good to hear. Now if you excuse me I have to get back to work." "Yes, princess," she informed him, and everyone watched as Naruto's face lit up with anger. "I just want to let you know that Zaft sent some people to try and assassinate Kira and I." With his fist clenched, he said softly, "Are you sure they were Zaft?" "We confirmed the model of suit was one of that is produced for Zaft Special Forces," Maru said. Slowly, Naruto nodded. "Thank you for the information," he replied. "I will keep you informed on the movements of Zaft. I will do my own personal investigation on this matter." He drew Lacus into a second embrace. As he held her, he said, "You should have called me." Lacus gave him a hug in return. She said, "I didn't want you to worry," as she released the hug. "I can take care of myself, I am a big girl." With a fatherly smile, Naruto sighed and said, "You are a big girl. But you will always be my little girl. I love you." Smiles, she said, "I love you too, Daddy." He turned to the crew after giving her a final embrace. He said, "Keep me posted," and vanished in an instant. There was a sigh of relief from the crew when Naruto left. The encounter with the mercenary left them feeling very shaken. Maru observed Lacus, Kira, and Kigali standing side by side, their memories of Naruto still vivid. She turned to face the other members of the crew. She said firmly, "Let's get back to work, people." With a nod, everyone moved to their stations, prepared to face the future. With Naruto when he reappeared on the Minerva's deck, he sighed and turned, the night air blowing across his skin, asking himself, what is going on with this war? He took out his phone and called Tenten. "Yes, Naruto?" she inquired. He stood in front of the door and said, "I want you to go into the chairman's personal files and get me everything he has. I need you to do a deep search for me." After a moment of silence, Tenten said, "Understood. Is there anything in particular you would like me to look for?" "I want everything," Naruto said coldly, grinning, "down to his birth certificate and social security number. Anything that he has said, written, or touched." "You want everything," Tenten said with a whistle. "I understand. I'll get it, even if it takes some time." His rage had diminished, but Naruto was now even more tired of the chairman and intended to cut all ties with him as soon as he could. He simply nodded and said, "That is fine, just get it done." He then disconnected and went into the ship's hallway. His eyes narrowed as he designated Chairman Gilbert Durandal as his enemy and said, "You don't mess with my family." As they flew through the air, everyone was on high alert as the Minerva prepared to set sail for Gibraltar once more. Talia looked out onto the day, happy to see the sun rise but not at ease because the night before, Naruto had told her that they wouldn't see the Archangel again. She had asked him how he had learned this information, but he told her it didn't matter, and she said she needed confirmation of the information she was getting, but all Naruto said was that his word was all she needed. She said angrily, "That man." Her vice, Captain Arthur, interrupted her thoughts, asking, "Yes, Arthur, what is it?" He said, "Well, we checked his room, but he is not there. The pilots are looking for Naruto, but he is nowhere to be found." She only responded that he went to meditate when we asked. Talia sighed and said, "Have you checked his machine?" "Yes, ma'am, but he is not there either," Arthur said with a nod. As she looked through the cameras and saw nothing, she asked herself, where could he be? Go through this morning's security footage and see if you can see where he has gone. Myron said from her station, Ma'am, I don't think that will be necessary. Talia gave Myron a look. She inquired, where is he? Pulling up the ship's rear camera, Myron angled it toward the bridge. A human figure was perched atop the bridge. Talia saw Naruto's shirtless form sitting motionless atop the bridge when she zoomed in. Surprised, Arthur asked, how did he get up there? Myron, could you please get a message to him to come down? Talia simply sighed. Myron said, yes ma'am, and climbed onto the ship's external microphone. Naruto, please come in. Naruto didn't seem to notice Myron's attempts to get a response. Talia shook her head and sighed in frustration. She rubbed the bridge of her nose and said, send one of the pilots to get him. With Naruto perched atop the bridge, Naruto allowed the sun and wind to caress his skin. In order to concentrate and prepare for the battles that lay ahead, he was now collecting nature chakra. As his thoughts drifted back to earlier days, he inhaled deeply. The sound of his name being called jolted him out of his reverie, but he ignored it. Naruto was left in silence after the voice faded away after multiple attempts to get his attention. He laughed and opened his eyes to see that they had switched to Sage mode. Let's see who they send to get me. He felt every living thing move as he surveyed the land, and then he sensed the presence of chakra and turned to face it. Even though it was miles away, he could sense that it was floaty and irregular. Though it was still too far away for him to get a precise reading on the person, he began to focus in on it after realizing it was one of the Earth Force's pilots. With a sigh of disappointment, he closed his eyes and released the nature chakra. He got to his feet, raised his arms above his head, glanced out to sea again, and turned to return to the ship. He tried to enter the ship by reaching for the hatch, but it was locked. He made multiple unsuccessful attempts to open the hatch before letting out a weary sigh. As he approached the edge, he told himself, I could always take the fun way down. He saw the outer deck when he looked down. He stepped back a few paces and a smile spread across his face. He yelled, here I go, and started to run. As he did so, the hatch behind him opened, revealing Luna Maria. Naruto was almost to the edge when Luna turned to see him. As she watched him jump, she exclaimed in shock, Naruto. Pulling out her comm, she dashed toward the edge. Captain, he jumped. With Talia, when Talia heard what Luna had to say, she gasped in shock. She exclaimed, he did what? And the entire bridge jumped in shock. Turning to Myron, she said, bring up the camera. Myron followed instructions promptly, and the image soon popped up on the screen. With Naruto had already leapt into the air when he heard Luna call his name. He began to fall with his arms and legs spread wide, unconcerned by that. When he noticed that the ship was tilting slightly, he flipped so that he could slide down the slope to the next drop after landing. He slid for quite a distance before the edge was visible. The outer deck was beneath the edge. Naruto simply grinned, got to his feet, and was able to leap and run a short distance. After a few moments of sailing in midair, he tucked into a roll and struck the deck with his shoulder. After rolling a couple of times, he was on the verge of hitting the railing when he suddenly popped up and slid to a halt. Naruto turned to see Luna sprint onto the outer deck, followed by several medical personnel. Are you all right? She asked frantically as she saw Naruto standing there as if nothing had happened, her shock visible on her face. He put his hand to his chin and said, I could have stuck the landing better. As he passed them and entered the ship, Luna and the medics gazed at him in wonder. Naruto and Meer strolled slowly through the ship toward the cafeteria. Naruto glanced at her and noticed the unease in her gait. Although she appeared composed to everyone around her, she was actually experiencing a raging storm of anxiety and fear. Naruto wrapped a fatherly arm around her shoulder as they walked. At this gesture, Meer appeared to relax, letting go of the tension in her body. He allowed a tiny smile to appear on his face, happy to be able to console her in some way. Naruto removed his arm from her shoulder as they arrived at their destination. As they entered, everyone turned to watch them, but they soon returned to their meals. Naruto got their food while Meer sat down at one of the open tables. They ate in silence after he brought the food. After finishing first, Naruto watched Meer while a little plan began to take shape in his head. When she had finished her meal, he said, Lacus, have you practiced your singing lately? After giving him a quick glance, Meer nodded and said, I sing in my room. With a smile spreading across his face, he nodded. He got up and said, that is good. Naruto dragged Meer from her seat and carried her to the front of the tables, saying, but you need to practice in front of an audience. Meer gave him a startled look, but she was powerless to stop herself when she saw the crew's excited expression. As she began to play along, she put her chin to her head and asked Naruto, which song should I sing? He smiled and said, how about Quiet Night? With a calm expression on her face, Meer nodded and said, okay, before closing her eyes. The notes of the song filled the air as Naruto stood back and watched her start to sing. As her voice floated across the room, the crew watched, enthralled. As Meer's face lit up with happiness, Naruto simply grinned. The one place she felt most joyous and in total control was when she performed. When he noticed Talia standing in the rear of the room, he kept his eyes on the crowd. He nodded and moved through the enthralled crowd when she waved for him to approach. Talia gestured for him to follow her out of the cafeteria when he arrived. The door shut behind him as soon as they left the room, leaving them alone in the quiet. He leaned against the wall and said, "Yes, Captain," in a kind manner. She folded her arms beneath her breasts and asked, "I heard you were the one who started this impromptu concert." "Maybe," he said, smiling slyly. "Is that a problem?" Talia simply gave a headshake. With a slight smile on her face, she said, "No, I think it was a good idea. The crew needs the distraction before our next battle." Naruto nodded and turned back to face Meer as she sang. They were not the only ones who needed this concert. He said, "Well, I am glad I could have helped with bringing the crew some joy." Talia gave him a slightly perplexed look but chose not to ask him. "Naruto," she began, capturing his interest once more. "I was hoping you would join me in my office later to talk about this conflict. I would like to hear your thoughts on it." His face was unreadable as he gazed at her for a few moments. He smiled broadly and said, "That would be fun. How about this evening?" Talia gave a nod of agreement. "That sounds good." She merely sighed and moved in the direction of the bridge when he said, "Then at a date." With a sly smile. He could swear that she was walking with an extra sway to her hips as he watched her. The 3 hours that followed waiting for the all clear to launch, Naruto sat in his machine on the catapult. Everyone had returned to their jobs after Meer's concert, which had ended 2 hours earlier. After having a great time and signing some documents for the crew, Meer went back to the room to rest. The battle alarm was sounded shortly after, and everyone went to their stations. He launched last and was soon discovered by daylight. He took off for his spot at the back of the ship. With practiced ease, his eyes scanned the incoming foes. With a cheeky grin, he said to everyone over the comms, "Let's make this a quick one. I've got plans tonight." Luna gave him a curious look. "What plans?" He glanced at Talia briefly before responding, "Just plans. Now don't die on me, people." "Roger," everyone said, and the conflict started. Determining to reach their target, the Earth forces and Orb mobile suit flew forward, but they were confronted by beam fire and missiles. Naruto became a little concerned when he noticed that the attacking fleet was somewhat smaller than it had been the day before. Furthermore, the green and black units were not present. In an attempt to determine what caused this sensation, he shot down a few enemies who managed to get past. However, nothing sprang to mind, and he returned his attention to the fight in Meer's defense. With the bridge, Talia observed how effectively her pilots repelled the enemy mobile suits, letting only a handful approach the ship before being shot down by the next line of defense. She noticed that the majority of the enemy fleet was made up of Orb forces, with a small number of Earth forces vessels. As she observed the battle, she gave the order, "Myron, I want you to do a scan of the area. Something not right?" "Yes, ma'am." Myron nodded and hurriedly typed on her computer while scanning the sonar and radar for any unusual activity. "All clear, ma'am." Myron said abruptly, "We now have 10 Earth forces ships at our rear." Talia nodded, "Ma'am." Talia gave Myron a startled look. With rage, she declared, "It's an ambush. Have Shin move toward the rear, Athron, Luna, and Hina tighten your formation. Do not allow those mobile suits to get through." The bridge came to life, and everyone said, "Roger." Naruto called out over the comms, "Captain, keep Shin forward. I got it covered here." She gave Naruto an inquisitive glance. "I trust in your skills," she replied, "but this is too big of a fleet for just one person to handle." Naruto laughed and said, "Let me show you what happens when you wake the dragon." With a push of his thrusters, Naruto launched himself forward at lightning speed. The fleet in front of him was ambushing. Many of the mobile suits that had just been removed or were in the process of being removed were eliminated when he raised his beam rifle and started firing beam after beam in rapid succession. A few suits attempted to shoot him, but they were swiftly neutralized as he sidestepped. Naruto took a small step back and aimed his beam rifle at the approaching adversaries. In order to transfer the energy core of Sananju to the rifle, he started to pour some of his chakra into it. He said emotionlessly, "Enjoy meeting the Reaper," and was fired. Several squadrons of enemy mobile suits were destroyed when a massive beam blast from his rifle traveled at incredible speeds. He boosted his thrust and kept pouring chakra into the Sananju until he was only a red blur. A red blur of death danced among their ranks, and the enemy could only watch in horror and wonder. When he arrived at the first ship, He landed on the deck and killed everyone on the bridge with his beam saber. He proceeded to the next vessel and hit the bridge. He avoided a beam shot from behind him just as he was ready to board the next ship. He turned to face his assailant and noticed that it was Gaia, the black mobile suit, with its rifle aimed at him. The Gaia shot at him as he charged forward. After avoiding the explosion, he retracted his fist and struck the Gaia in the face. After briefly reversing course, the Gaia landed on one of the ships below. After putting the Gaia in mobile armor mode, the pilot launched it at Naruto at a frightening speed. Naruto simply raised his beam saber and bided his time. With a leap, the Gaia ignited its beam saber. The two weapons made contact, but Naruto easily pushed the Gaia away. He managed to cut its back leg as he pursued it, causing it to limp away from him. He had to avoid a series of beam blasts just as he was ready to launch another attack. A swarm of wingdoms flew in his direction as he turned. Naruto rolled to the side and retaliated with his own beam fire after they fired their weapons. With the exception of one that managed to dodge at the last second, he eliminated the majority of the units. He turned to look at the Gaia after watching the lone unit fly away from him, but it was nowhere to be seen. As the ships fired all of their weapons at him, he sighed and told himself, "I guess I have to try and get him next time." He started to add more chakra to his suit, telling himself, "Time to end this." Everyone watched as he drew out his beam saber, which was getting bigger and bigger. He raised it above his head and lowered it upon the ships in front of him. He eliminated 2 ships in a single swing, leaving 6 remaining. After dodging a barrage of missile fire, he struck again, eliminating 3 more. With his saber raised, he faced the final 3 ships. He said, "Enjoy your end," and lowered the saber, causing the ships to vanish. With a scene of death and flames behind him, he turned back to the Minerva. With Talia's expression was one of wonder as she watched Naruto fly back to the ship. She had witnessed him damage the Gaia and eliminate the entire ambushing fleet, including all of its mobile suits, without suffering any injuries. She was taken aback by his machine's unexpected display of power, which included the ship-splitting sword and the Lohengrin level beam. As she observed him reoccupying his position at the back of the ship, she asked herself, how is he able to do all that? The aftermath of the last battle was merely a memory as the Minerva continued to sail into the night. In her quarters, Talia sat at her desk and reviewed a number of files and reports that she had been sent. He verified Naruto's statement that one came from Athron, who had also communicated with the Archangel. She made Luna follow him so she could see who he met. She studied the photos curiously. The sound of a knock on her door jolted her from her reverie. After putting the files and photos away, she turned to face the door. "Come in." Naruto emerged through the open door, dressed in black slacks, black loafers, and a plain white button-up shirt with the top button undone. He was holding a bottle of wine. He smiled and said, "It's evening." With a simple smile, Talia said, "I am happy you could make it." She got up from her desk and took off her captain's hat. As she took 2 wine glasses out of one of her cabinets, Naruto simply nodded and walked over to the couch. "I am happy to be spending time with you, Talia. It is not often I get the chance to spend time with such a beauty as yourself." Talia blushed a little and glared at him. "Flattery will get you nowhere." As he sat down, he said, "I wasn't trying to flatter you, Talia. I am merely stating the fact that you are beautiful." As she sat down, she shook her head and sighed slightly. She noticed from looking at the wine that it was from before the cosmic era began to mark time. She examined the bottle and inquired, "Where did you get this?" As he accepted the bottle from Talia and uncorked it, Naruto laughed and replied, "Like you, I have many friends who are collectors of fine wines. Actually, when he owned one of the biggest wineries in the world, he had produced this wine himself." He handed her a drink that he had poured for her. "Enjoy." With the wine's ruby hue dancing in the glass, she took the glass and gazed at it. She slowly swirled the wine and sniffed it. Naruto observed her as she removed the cup from her lips and took a tiny sip of the wine. For a moment, she was quiet, enjoying the wine's flavor. She grinned genuinely and said, "This is one of the best wines I have ever tasted." When Naruto saw this, his heart stopped. It had been a few years since it had occurred, so he was a little taken aback. Pushing the emotion aside, he picked up his own glass. He took a drink after saying, "I am glad that it is to your liking." Talia simply took another sip and nodded. She put down her cup and looked curiously at Naruto. "Naruto," she said, meeting his eyes directly, "what are your thoughts on the war?" With a thoughtful expression on his face, Naruto took another sip of wine and carefully put the cup down. "This war will bring more heartache and misunderstanding before it is over," he stated. Talia turned back to Naruto and nodded while glancing at her wine. "Yes, many lives have been lost and will be lost as long as this conflict continues. Do you believe this conflict has an end?" Naruto briefly averted his gaze from Talia. Simply put, he said, this war will's end, all wars do. Talia remained quiet while she took in what he had said. He expressed concern for everyone as a whole in his responses without indicating any preference for one side over the other. His ability to see past their genes and recognize their true selves was something she admired. Do you think there will be peace once the war ends? There will be a time of peace, as always after a war, but over time a new battle will begin, Naruto said somberly as he sipped his wine, recalling previous battles. Peace lasts only as long as the people wish for it to last. Talia noticed that Naruto had changed, that his wall of joking and flirting had fallen. She saw a war-torn man who had witnessed numerous battles. She could tell by the look in his eyes that he had seen more than anyone else in his lifetime. She comforted him by reaching out and touching his arm. He glanced at her and smiled appreciatively. She simply grinned as his sorrow quickly subsided. For a short while, they were both absorbed in their own thoughts and were silent. Naruto's heart slowed as he glanced at Talia. Everyone could see how beautiful she was from the way the light fell on her face. He was staring at her when Talia turned around. Yes, Naruto, she said, rousing him from his reverie. His face flushed, and he turned his head away. He stammered, attempting to control his escalating feelings. Would you like to dance? Talia gave him a startled look at the impromptu query. She looked at him curiously and replied, yes, I do enjoy to dance. Naruto merely grinned, but he was internally panicking because the question had suddenly come to him as his thoughts returned to normal. He briefly considered a hasty plan coming together. One of the music files he took out of his pocket. The music started as soon as he plugged it into the wall console. It was a waltz, friendly slow rhythm. Rising to his feet, he extended his hand to Talia. In a gentlemanly tone, he said, may I have this dance? He helped Talia stand up after she took his hand. They quickly started dancing to the music after he helped her get into the right position. She observed as he led her from one move to another around the room. Before long, all thoughts of the war and conflict vanished from their minds as they merged with the music. They were only thinking about one another. Naruto dipped Talia as the song came to an end and slowly pulled her back up until her face was just inches from his. Time seemed to stop as he gazed into her gray eyes, and he didn't want this moment to pass. Talia was the first to separate, her face flushed. She brushed some of her hair away from her face and said, thank you for the dance. She pulled her hands from his. He wanted to hold her hands again, so he said, you're welcome, Talia. After some time, with a thoughtful expression on his face, Naruto strolled through the ship's corridors. He was disappointed that his lovely evening with Talia was coming to an end, but he needed time to reflect. His heart had not been on the verge of stopping while he was with a woman for a long time. As he stepped out onto the outer deck and gazed into the night, he asked himself, what is the matter with me? Kyuubi's voice called out, hey brat, and Naruto turned to see the big fox staring at him. How was your date with the captain? He smiled happily and said, it was nice. Kyuubi merely observed Naruto with a sly grin. You're falling for her. Naruto let out a sigh. He raked his hand through his hair and said, it seems so. Then make her yours, Kyuubi said, grinning broadly as he approached Naruto. All you do is claim her as yours and you're done. Naruto simply shook his head and sighed, you know it is not that easy. It is that easy, and you just overthink it, Kyuubi said, shaking his head. Naruto looked at his companion and laughed, saying, that may be true. But I still have hope that she will awaken, I can't betray her. You realize she might never wake up, Kyuubi said, reassuringly bumping his head in Naruto's hand. Talia is a good woman. She would be a nice one to be with. You have to decide. Naruto simply nodded, letting out another sigh. Why does love like to sneak up on me? A few days later the night sky bounced off the Minerva's white armor as it flew along the coast. They had been ordered to investigate a nearby abandoned Earth Forces facility. The crew moved around and got ready to enter the building. A little nervous about what the facility might hold, Captain Gladys sat in her chair and studied the orders. While some of the other crew members provided support, she had directed Athron, Rei, Luna, and Shin to join the investigation team. Captain, said Myron, typing at her desk. The facility is ahead. Initial scans have shown no Earth forces in the area. Talia replied, understood. Have the investigation team prepares to embark? Yes, ma'am. Talia watched the investigation team leave as the ship touched down. Everyone is still on high alert because of her. Hina was in his machine, prepared to go at any time. She quickly discovered that the facilities were secure after listening to the comm chatter. Through the comms, Athron said, all clear ma'am, awaiting your orders. Talia was beaming. Very good, meet me at the entrance and we will search the facilities. Roger. Talia rose from her seat and made her way to the ship's outer hatch area. She confronted Naruto as she stepped into the elevator. He grinned affectionately at her and said, "Hello, Captain. Fancy seeing you here." Talia merely shot him a blank stare. "What can I do for you, Naruto?" "Can't I visit my favorite captain?" he said, approaching her and asking. At his antics, Talia tried not to sigh. She looked at him incredulously and said, "I am needed elsewhere." Naruto simply put his arm through hers and grinned. "How about I join you? You never know what dangers lurk on this adventures." Although she liked the idea of having him there to assist them in viewing the facility, she simply shook her head. As they left the elevator and proceeded through the hallways with their arms still locked, she said, "I would like that." They got off the ship and went to join the pilots. At this point, Talia had disconnected from Naruto and turned to face the gathered group. She said, "Athron," and he stood alert. "You are to cover the back, Shin and Rei. I want you to be on point." The group entered the facility after they took their positions and said, "Yes, ma'am." The halls were bright because the power had been restored, and they moved through the building in silence, inspecting the rooms as they went by. The first few rooms were holding units that had not been used for a long time. With his eyes searching every inch of the rooms, Talia watched as Naruto scowled as he entered one of them, pressed his hand to the wall, closed his eyes, and scowled more. His eyes were still closed when he took his hand away, and his face was filled with sadness, but he saw nothing. He opened his eyes, and for a moment, Talia thought they were orange. He seemed intent on finding something, and as he left the room and continued down the hall past more doors, he said, "We need to go deeper." Talia trailed behind him but stopped when she saw Rei acting oddly. "Rei," she said to get his focus. "Yes, Captain," he answered. "Are you okay?" With concern, she inquired. "I am fine." She nodded and turned to follow Naruto, who had made it to the last room after going down the hall, where he stood at a computer and read over the data while his shoulders trembled. The walls of the room were lined with jarred brains. Walking beside him, Talia took in the information and started reading it. As she did, she let out a startled cry and asked, "What have they done?" With barely controlled rage, Naruto said, "They wanted soldiers to fight the monsters." He walked away from the console and made his way to the door, saying, "I will leave these to you, Captain." With Naruto after leaving Talia in the room, Naruto walked to the top of the building, feeling alone as he went. After standing motionless for a short while, he let out a powerful chakra blast, his eyes red with anger. Those repulsive, depraved, and cruel creatures. As a Rasengan formed in his hand, he yelled, "They don't realize what they've done." He had read the material and found that they had unlocked the ability to use chakra, but it was an ineffective method of doing so. Similar to Rock Lee, it was used to make people stronger and faster. They experimented on children, sacrificing many in order to create a small number of chakra users. When he saw the impulse fly by, he quickly turned his senses on high and discovered that one of the chakra users had arrived. Shin had engaged the target and disabled the enemy, and Naruto arrived just in time to see the Gaia cockpit open and the pilot emerge, falling to the ground as she struggled to fight, her breath coming in short gasps. The Zaft forces approached her, and Shin appeared to recognize her. Naruto was about to approach, but she was taken into the ship.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.